The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation Region Number 4. These are the traditional territories and ancestral lands of the Indigenous peoples, including the Plains Cree First Nations, Assiniboine-Winnewack, Rocky Mountain First Nations, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, Nakota, Denessaline, Saulteaux, Mountain Métis, Michif, and many other communities that continue to enrich the land on which the town of Hinton was established. With this sentiment, I'll call the meeting to order. Councillor Administration, any additions or changes to today's agenda? Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add a closed session item, interim CAO contract, ideally between 3 and 4. So it'd be the 4th item, and code of conduct would move to 5. Thank you.
Council, any issues with that at all? I don't see any opposition with that. Ms. Howarth, is it possible to know what FOIP sections number 1 and number 2 for closed session are?
Yes. We can add them later. I recognize you'd like to have that going into there. Certainly the oversight, that's the applications and then the payment options. We can get that to you later in the meeting.
Yeah, maybe if just when we go in camera for those,
okay.
At that point, that would be great. And I would assume CO contract would be section 24 as well.
Correct, same as it was last time. Yeah. So sorry, we didn't have our legislative scan on this before the agenda went out. So we'll go get that before you go in camera tonight. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Anything else for changing the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call to question, I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Councillor Magoon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we adopt the Standing Committee meeting agenda for September 21st, 2021 as amended.
Great, thank you, Councillor Magoon. All those in favor? Sorry, Mayor Michaels, I didn't see you there. Perfect. Yeah, just if you guys hold them up for a second with there being this many people on Zoom, so that's carried unanimously. Administration, were there any citizens minute with council today?
No, none, thank you.
None. So that takes us to our first item, which is boards and committee of council reporting. And I would like to welcome Ross Risvold, Sue Allen, Jessica Hersey, and Shirley Caputo, and as the CRRC committee, and I'll turn it over to you guys. And just for clarification, if there's questions from council, would you prefer those at the end or partway through?
Anytime is fine.
Perfect.
So I am the chair of this committee. Thank you for having us tonight. It was a good experience for all of us. We enjoyed working on this committee together, although there were a few challenges for us. So we will let you know what that's all about. And will you put on the PowerPoint presentation, Laura, or what's that going to look like?
You can go ahead and share your screen, Ms. Hershey.
I don't have it open right now. Just give me 1 second here. All right, I will share my screen here. Okay, so here is our recommendation regarding the council remuneration. So one thing that was challenging for us was the very short timelines to do such important work. So with the information that was gathered up front, we were provided with a report from a similar town that we then started looking at and trying to compare the council remuneration for similar towns to Hinton, which was difficult due to the fact that some communities use a different model than us. Our model has an honorarium for just general council work and preparation, and then has separate meeting fees, where a lot of the similar communities have a system where it's the meeting fees for all regular and standing meetings are included in their honorarium. So we did find it a little challenging to compare the total compensation apples to apples. Going forward in the future with longer timelines and more preparation, we do think it would make sense to look at switching to a model that is more easily comparable to similar towns as us. So that was something that made our job challenging. So we do think that the process should begin in the third year as opposed to a couple of months before the actual election, so that not only is there time to gather all the information needed, there's time to do the work, do the updates, and then prior to people running for council or mayor, they know what's going to happen. It's not going to change, because now it's going to potentially change on October 5th when everyone just put in their papers on yesterday. So it may be different than what they were expecting. So our recommendation is regarding council remuneration, so the honorariums and the meeting fees and benefits. So based on the current economic climate, we think it's reasonable for council's monthly honorarium to stay the same as it is. And mayor, we had some trouble finding how Hinton got the term full-time mayor in its title. So we were unsure as to how that happened or when that happened or why that happened. When we're comparing Hinton to similar communities, it doesn't seem reasonable in our opinion that Hinton necessarily needs a full-time mayor. So we recommend removing that term full-time mayor from the title and just saying mayor and reducing the honorarium from $5,000 to $3,750 a month. This does take into account that the honorarium is just for, the overall duties of the mayor, and then any additional meetings that are attended are paid on top of that honorarium. So if full-time duties are required by the mayor or the town and the council determine that's reasonable or their additional effort is required, then they will still be compensated fairly for that additional effort. One of the comments that we heard quite regularly from a lot of the council members was a challenge in the effective time management of meetings, let's say. So lots of meetings, they were saying it seemed like we could almost finish it, but then we didn't want to go over the 4 hours, the 8 hours. So we thought that it seems reasonable, especially giving effective time management of meetings. There shouldn't be much of a need for meetings over 8 hours. So in order to reflect that, what we recommend is we change the per diem meeting fee structure. So previously it was 0 to 4 hours was $125 across the board. What we recommend is we reduce that structure. So we say 0 to 2 hours is $75 an hour, 2 to 4 hours is $125 for the meeting fee. And then anything over 4 hours is a flat $250. So it doesn't matter if it's 4.5 hours or if it's 9 hours, the counselors are still getting paid $250, as opposed to after 8 hours, it bumps up to $350. So like I said, we don't believe that any change to the counselor's honorarium is required. We felt that was in line with comparable communities, kind of around that 60th percentile. Currently, based on the information that we had, Hinton was in the 100th percentile. So they, counselors and mayor, were getting paid the highest of anyone, which, although we very much value the work that you do, we do think it's reasonable to be more in the middle of the pack. And like I said, the mayor's position, the title should have the full-time portion of that removed. Trevor?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, is it okay if I questions during or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you might just have to speak up. I do have everybody's faces on here, but it's quite small. So
Yeah, gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Hersey. I guess a question that I have, and I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it. There was a time where the mayor's wage was increased to the 5,000 from, and I don't recall, what was the wage at that time that was increased to the 5,000?
That was your question?
Yeah, I was curious. Were you aware of what it was to what it went to?
No, unfortunately, we were unable to find any information as to why it changed, when it changed, what it was before, even with the support of administration. So that was a challenge for us. So that's the kind of information that it would be nice to have when you're making recommendations, because then you kind of know where you came from, why the changes were made. And I think that's why we need longer timelines and maybe more support from administration to pull that kind of previous information.
Right. Because if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, these are the new way of doing things. Between now and October 5th, if there are a few things that council's looking for to support the actual decision on the 5th, we can certainly do that via direction as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I will. That's something that I need to know, because there was a time, just I guess more of a comment than a question, but I mean, I guess I'd be curious, because there was that change potentially from part-time to full-time. Need to, I guess, understand that a little bit more, and that there was a time where it was increased to the 5,000 and maybe what that was and some of the reasoning. So I definitely would be interested in that, with this substantial recommendation for a reduction, because I believe there probably was some reasoning back then and of course some reasoning now, but that would be something that I'd be interested in before making a decision. So thank you, Ms. Hersey. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And because I certainly don't want to hijack the presentation, but there seems to be a question of timelines. It was a recommendation that grew out of the remuneration work done to the previous council. So it was certainly during my tenure, I remember that coming forward as part of the work of a previous remuneration committee. But again, I'll simply leave the rest for future discussions. Thank you.
And I think it's also important to note that, and this is just the advice from the committee, but we think that it's advising to keep the honorariums not to exceed the 60th percentile. So if you do make changes, you're also going to have to reflect on other things that are included in the presentational recommendations.
Thank you. Council, any other questions before we move on to the next slide? Not seeing any there, Ms. Hersey. You can keep going with your presentation.
Okay, so part of the discussion we had was regarding benefits. So currently, the elected officials are paying for their premiums through the AUMA. We believe it would be reasonable for the town to pay those and for the coverage while councillors and mayor are working for the town. Currently, the professional development is $3,000 per year per councillor. We thought that was very reasonable. We would also like to see more transparency for the professional development. So something like the expense reporting, where it's detailed like what professional development each councillor and mayor is taking. Just so you can see that it lines up with the kind of the goals of the town. And then also, that being said, we thought it would be reasonable to have the amount of 3,000 carried forward for 1 year, so that if there was a bigger training that needed to be done, you had a little bit more funding in that period. We also thought that reviewing the policy every year in conjunction with the budget would be good, so you could see where the money was going and when you had to spend it. So that was it for professional development and benefits. And now for the reporting here. So currently the policy states that the CAO reviews and signs off on the councillors and mayor's expense claims. Just from perspective of governance and due diligence, we thought it would make more sense, and a lot of other towns are going this way, is to have the mayor sign off on all of the councillors' reports, and then the deputy mayor sign off on the mayor's reports. So that's their timekeeping reports as well as their expense reports and any other thing that way. Just from a governance perspective, Ross, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, it just on that, I think I'm off mute, is that, well, it's good governance not to have the person who's reporting to mayor and council to have to be approving the expense and the honorariums meeting claims. So we just think that that cleans that up, and I think it puts the CAO in a very tough situation, or we did, if the CEO has to approve the mayor and council's expenses and honorariums.
Thank you. So then we just came across a few housekeeping items that we discussed through reviewing the policies, both the council remuneration policy as well as the expense and credit card usage policy. There were a few inconsistencies, so we just thought we'd bring them to your attention. We do not think it's reasonable for the town to be reimbursing anyone for alcohol or cannabis. It doesn't currently say that in the policies, but we think that would be something that would be good to specifically add in there. We would like to see this review take place in the third year of the four-year term, just for timing and lead time and due diligence to collect the proper information and update everything. It actually was quite a bit of work. And then prior to the committee forming, it would be very beneficial for administration to gather useful information and comparable numbers from similar municipalities. And then that way, when the first meeting comes, the council or the committee doesn't have to kind of say, like, start from scratch. They kind of have a starting point to look at something. And then from there, it's easier to ask questions and gather more information or see what's going to be more useful information to ask administration to collect. We really like the guiding principles that the town of Warrenville had. So we had incorporated some of that into our draft policy, which I think you'll see there. And it just, was all about how council and mayor are stewards of the town's money, and they should be always being responsible with it. And that's kind of, the overarching guiding principle of how they get compensated. Any questions about anything there? All right, I see most people shaking their heads.
Madam Chair, if I can mention, another reason for the suggesting that this be done in its third year. If I was running for council right now, I would not want to be having to make a decision just before the election. So it just also it provides for more objective decision making when it comes down to this, if it's done in the third year, and especially with what Jessica said the other reasons were, which is extremely important. Thanks. Sorry, Jessica.
No worries. So we did discuss here the meetings going over schedule and not really knowing what is provided to counselors when they come on in regards of training. We thought we would mention it would be really great to see some of that PD money spent on how to run an effective and efficient meeting, what the roles and responsibilities of the chair are, and focusing on, PD so that meetings run effectively and efficiently and everyone knows their role, which we weren't sure what was provided. We also thought that would be something that would be very useful for these committees, because oftentimes it is community members that maybe don't have experience with board meetings. So even just like a quick upfront, like, here's what the chair does, here's how the meetings work, all that type of thing would be beneficial just to set up efficient meetings and make it less frustrating for community members to get involved, because that was a big part of our challenge was, getting the information we need, having timelines that worked for spending a whole day in discussions about council remuneration. It's very challenging as, anyone in the community with a full-time job or anything to just drop a day a week, the next week and focus on something else. So just extended timelines, just being aware of the ask for volunteers and the time commitment it is, and then being respectful of their time. And that looks to be the end of the presentation. So if anyone has any other questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Hersey. If you could just unshare your screen, then I'll be able to see everybody a little bit better. Council, any questions for the committee?
If there are none, I would just like to say that Ms. Hersey did, I think, an excellent job of chairing this committee, and would like to thank her. And also Shirley and Sue, I really appreciate working with you and how prepared you were and everything like that. So it was a pleasure working with this committee, I have to say.
Perfect, thank you. Do have a question for Mayor Michaels? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you, committee, for your work. I was one who told the committee, I think that the mayor's salary was a bit high. In the last 3 years, it's changed quite a bit. And to the original question, I think Mayor Mackin's salary was just below $3,900, but administration can confirm that later. So I know it's hard to find the balance. My one question was because the section 4.4 took away some of the events that wouldn't count towards the $3,000 a year to use on for your conferences, etc. And going to FCM and going to the Leaders Caucus, that accumulates fast because technically it would be your hotel, your flight if it's in another province for FCM, and that would eat your entire budget, right? So they excluded that. So then the mayor and council for FCM specifically wouldn't use the $3,000 unless I missed it. It looks like it's omitted in the updated draft. Was that the intent of the committee to for the mayor to just have $3,000 every year, and that excludes FCM, AUMA, and you'd have to then deduct from that $3,000 amount each year?
My opinion was that the professional development is for other professional development things. Council had it in your budget before, and we didn't take it out. That you're allowed, I think it's, well, the mayor, you can go to all FCM, I believe. And then council, what is it now? You get one chance to go to an FCM conference. You also had it in there that unless it was held, and I'm assuming in Alberta, it cost a little less. So Marcelo, I mean, it wasn't my understanding that we were taking that away from you, because that's different type of professional development.
So if
I don't think we mentioned that in our recommendations.
Right, but just on page, I forget, just the draft that shows the updated one with all the red writing, it removes it there, and then it says look at option Appendix A. And then Appendix A doesn't speak to it. So seeing this from a new council, they would assume by reading it, I would think, and that's why I wanted to know the intent, and perhaps we can fix that, that the $3,000 for a counselor wouldn't include their FCM year, and for the mayor, FCM and AUMA doesn't include, and then they still get $3,000, like you had said, for other. And if that's the intent, then we could find a way to put it in, unless I missed it, like I said. But thanks for the clarification on the intent.
Okay, now maybe I misunderstood what the rest of the committee, we better listen to others on this and not just myself.
Yes, I believe you are correct, Ross. Our intent was that the FCM and the other conferences would be excluded from that PD budget. The wording must just be different in the draft. So good question, Marcel.
Thanks. Council, any other questions? I guess seeing none, did council want to continue discussing this at this point without the committee? Do we have what we need to bring forward to the October 5th meeting? Is that's possibly our only opportunity to make any changes if we see fit? Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment overall. There's a lot of it that I really like. I do like the recommendation for benefits to be able to channel that, because that's a cost. I pay that out of my pocket, and any mayor would have to do that, especially. I do agree with the full-time position removal. I think that's a choice, and it was the recommendation of the last council to simply put, or the last committee to put it in, because there was talk, because prior to Mayor Mackin, I think the mayor was, grossly not grossly, but it was underpaid when it was Mr. Duncan or Mayor Duncan and Mayor Taylor at the time. So that I have no issue. The one question, and as long as this is the protocol, and I think I heard correctly, the mayor reviewing the timesheets of the other councilors, if that's the status quo in other municipalities, then no problem. It just makes it somewhat challenging, and then debating legislatively or getting I'd be making, or Councillor Nelson or whoever's the mayor would have to be deciding, does this fall into it or not, where really that's an administrative recommendation perhaps. So then we're interpreting policy. That's my only concern. Otherwise, I think I support that. So I guess my question is this standard everywhere or most places?
There was still kind of a mix between the two. So maybe it does require some further research.
But Marcel, I think I'd like to speak on this. You're interpreting policy, but the policy is pretty straightforward. You have your honorariums, you have what you're allowed on your expenses, and you have what you can claim on your meeting fees for meeting fees for committees that you're appointed to. So I don't think it's onerous for the mayor to do that, because you know what the fees are. It's a matter of just looking at it. I don't necessarily like to go back on what I used to do, but I can remember turning some people down. I thought they didn't handle their expenses properly, and it only had to be done once. But I think the bigger issue is that it's not fair or good governance to have the person that's reporting to the mayor and council to be approving their expenses. I mean, that just puts them in an untenable position.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Do you have a follow-up to that? And then I have Councillor Magoon and Councillor Haas, and I think Ms. Caputo wanted to just add a piece to that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Risval. I agree with that part too. That's the challenging part, where I think I'm leaning towards it. As long as the mayor could have administrative help in accumulating, otherwise the mayor would then have to keep a total of every councillor, and that makes it a little challenging. So like I said, I think I'm leaning. I just wanted to make sure this isn't different than other municipalities, and it sounds, as per Mrs. Hersey, that other municipalities do this, but some choose not to. But this is not out of the realm. So I appreciate it. And the other comment, I really like the change. I appreciate the change in the meeting structure from 0 to 2 hours. I think for those quick meetings, I'd even maybe go a step further. And I know I'd like a rate for under an hour, under 30 minutes sometimes for these quick meetings. I know it's maybe micro-analyzing it, but it really cuts expenses for those emergency meetings that last 10 minutes, right? So, but I appreciate this is a great way forward, way better than before for that. Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Caputo, go ahead.
Are you on mute?
Well, thank you. Oh, yes. Can you hear me? Thank you. I'm just pulling the work that that was given to us, and one of them is from Morinville. And I'll read you what it states in their policy on council remuneration policy. And it states, the mayor shall be responsible for approving council's claims and the deputy mayor responsible for approving the mayor's claims. In the case of the mayor and or deputy mayor being absent, the outgoing deputy mayor may sign claims as appropriate. So that's in policy, in the Morinville policy, that they state about that. It shows accountability. It shows transparency, because you guys are approving the contract of that position. So it should be also that you would, that position would not be approving your expenses. But as Mayor Michael stated, he says, you know what, okay, I have to approve them, but then he says, I need administration's help on them. So that would be my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Caputo. Ms. Allen?
I just want to speak to Mayor Michael's question about having like a micro fee for maybe a 0 to a half-hour meeting, or a lower fee. And one of the things we actually thought was we wanted to acknowledge that we respect that the mayor and councillors do generally hold jobs, and that meetings are an interruption often, and that we didn't want to go any lower, to accept that, like, yeah, we acknowledge your time is valuable, and that if you're called to a meeting, regardless of the time, that at least $75 is a good threshold to begin at.
Very, thank you. Councillor Magoon, then Councillor Haas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And what I really appreciated, I think the mayor made some excellent comments in terms of some value added and efficiency building caveats built into the policy. The one that I actually appreciated because of the change in provincial elections was the having the remuneration committee meet into the third year, because what we've all seen in this past year is with elections nomination periods starting on January 1st, it changes that whole game, right? So we're not just worrying about a couple months of silly season. We're dealing with 10 months of it. So we certainly want people to be able to consider the impacts of how that's going to impact their family and their jobs over the long term. So I think, yeah, absolutely, for fairness to the remuneration committee and for people potentially running, that's a really great recommendation. So thanks for that.
Thank Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would, to speak to the timesheets and reviewing with the mayor, I agree with I believe that it should be the mayor personally. I think it puts the CEO in a difficult position and the other staff, but I wouldn't be in agreement without the administrative, administration to assist the mayor and deputy mayor as well in whatever policies or questions that we may have. But the actual signing off on it, I do believe that it's, that's a good place for the mayor and the deputy mayor to be. I guess to the wage, and I guess this is where I just did a little bit of my own kind of little research in regards to, and the average wage for a mayor that I found in Alberta looked anywhere from that 60 to 70,000. And it didn't specify full-time or whether it was part-time, but, and I guess that's where I'm at a little bit. I personally feel that 3750 to be that drop of 1250 to be a little much. Personally, I think it's a difficult job. Obviously never been in that position yet. I don't know if it's full-time or part-time. I'm not sure what hours our current mayor works and what past mayors have worked. But I mean, I just feel that, to drop it that much, currently at that 5,000 and 60,000 a year. And that's of course before deductions and things like that. So I mean, I know that we haven't making that decision tonight. It's just some comments of what I've made, and and we do have this decision to make. But personally, I think of my mind is to drop even the honorariums of council, a few $100s, and then upping that wage for the mayor too. So that's just some of my own thoughts, and that's where I was interested in. I look forward to see, and I thank you, Mayor Michaels, for mentioning about maybe the past and and what was the wage and then why it changed to that amount. So thank you.
I just have Mr. Griswold and then Councillor Waugh.
Okay, if I can just comment on that, we looked at the percentiles, and when you're dealing with small samples, which we are here, percentiles is much better than an average. I mean, averages can, because you can have extremes, and if you're dealing with comparing it to 5 towns, 6 towns, it can be thrown out one way or the other. And philosophically, we thought being in the 60th percentile, meaning that 60% of your people will be making less, that it was a reasonable amount. And I realize it's a large cut, but at the same time, maybe it was just, it was too much. And with a lot of different places, if a council is making 2,000, mayor would make 4. So if council is 1,800, it'd be 3,600. It's kind of like double for the chair or the mayor. So I don't think that the cut is unreasonable. And again, it's still in the 60th percentile, which means that 60% of the people below you are making less than what Hinton is. And I don't think politically, I wouldn't want to go above that, but again, that we're only recommending.
Thanks. Ms. Hersey, was it to do with that as well before I go to Councillor Haas or Councillor Waugh, sorry? Or I'll go to Councillor Waugh and then back to you, Ms. Hersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just wanted to get clarified. When you say 60th percentile, Mr. Griswold, is that in our comparable communities or all communities?
No, comparable.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have much else. I want to thank the committee. I think they did a great job, and there's good recommendations, particularly about the meeting fees and when the committee should reconvene for the next time. I think that's huge, especially with the changes on the provincial level. But yeah, I am still a little torn about the mayoral fee, whether it's called a full-time position or not. There's a lot of demands on that position. And I know that the last time the remuneration committee had actually recommended, I think, upping it to 6,000 per month. So at council at the time, it dropped it to 5, I believe, when they finally ratified it. So it gives some stuff to think about, but that is I think the one portion of your report that I do have some reserve about, and something I'm going to have to think about a little bit more. But I do appreciate a lot of the other recommendations. I think they're very good ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Ms. Hersey, then Mayor Michaels.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tyler and Trevor. I think the thing to take into consideration, we were having difficulty comparing apples to apples because of the structure of Hinton's payment compared to the structure of the payment for many of the other municipalities. So a lot of the other municipalities include a lot of their meeting fees for regular and standing committees in with their honorarium. So then having difficulty comparing that, we also looked at the total payment and then compared that to the percentiles of the other communities. And the mayor of Hinton, their total wage was higher than we expected to see. That's part of the reason that that recommendation is in place, is because even though the honorarium might not be seeming particularly high, when you take into account all the meeting fees on top of that, then the gross pay of the mayor is a lot higher as compared to similar towns. So that's kind of part of why we did that. That was our recommendation anyways.
I have Mayor Michaels, then Councillor Haas, then Councillor Magoon. Go ahead, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think this is really close. Like I said, I'd even suggested not even being paid for any committee meetings was another idea, or even going to conferences, that we don't even get an honorarium for going to conferences. That's within our honorarium. So we do get, I think, like compensated to help, like healthily or whatever. My apologies. So at the end, it kind of works out. My only reservation, if there's an appetite to that, it's a big cut, because the Councillor Waugh brought up a good point. The other committee wanted 6,000, which was way too much. I think it would be better to incentivize the mayor position to include EDA as one of the conferences that doesn't count towards their $3,000 budget. EDA to me is something that every mayor should be going. Economic development is extremely important. And that cost sometimes is $1,000 out of the development budget. So if there's an appetite that it's a little low, I think it's better to incentivize the mayor's position to go to these events and give more flexibility on stuff to do their job and maybe steer away from the compensation, which, like, in my personal mind, I don't think it should be more than $4,000 a month. $3,750 is close. So, like, to me, I have no issue at all with that. So that's would be my recommendation to maybe gain some flexibility on conferences. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'll go to Councillor Haas next. I think this is also a new format for us. So I also think if we're talking about, the politics or what we think as members of council, if it doesn't really have a lot to do with the committee, we have our opportunity to have that conversation as well. So Councillor Haas.
Thank you. I did want to mention, and then I have another just in regards to the mayor, but I do want to thank the committee for the recommendations on the meeting rates. I personally felt that they were too much, and especially that jump from the over 4 hours up to, then in between that 4 to 8. So I do appreciate that. I think that's a reasonable request. I guess the comment I have on the mayor's, and this is more of a, I guess, again, a philosophical question, but if we want a mayor that's more available potentially for things, I like the fact of a little bit more of that wage, because if we reduce it more, it may be where it's very difficult for a mayor to not have to have a second job potentially, and which makes that mayor then less available to the community and to, whether it's administration or whatever. So personally, I like the fact that our mayor is more available, especially too, because you mentioned that a lot of others have jobs and maybe we can't get to a committee meeting. The mayor is there then as an alternate if our alternate can't go. So, this is where I'm kind of and trying to think about, what we need or what needs for our community are. And maybe that's where I don't know the conversation that occurred from the increase. I mean, I agree 6,000 was too much, but I'm curious, I guess, what was the conversation then that jumped it from the 3 to the 6? And was that the philosophy that they were looking for? Because I think personally, I like that setup. I think our community likes it better in a way that the mayor's available more often. And, and I know other communities, the mayors are not as available because they do have a second job. So if we can somehow compensate for that, maybe that's where I'm toying with and torn in between, the finances of it and the 60 percentile, as you mentioned, and then having that ability to have that connection there. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Ross. I will, if the committee does want to speak directly to that, but we do have access to old council videos and minutes and agenda packages. So we do have those resources if we do need them. And ultimately, the committee is making recommendations based on comparables and what they heard, but they're making recommendations to council. We have to take into consideration what the community may want, what our expectations are, and what our experiences have been as well. So with that, I think Mr. Griswold was looking to speak to that directly.
Yes, thank you. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Haas, but the mayor, what was explained to us as a committee one time is that rather than saying you have full-time mayor, I mean, if the mayor is involved in a lot of different committees that are approved by council, there will be more money. I'm going to speak as a former mayor, and I was there 3 terms as mayor and 1 in council. I had another full-time job. You can be as available as you want to. And if you're making $6,000 a year, if you're making $3,000 a year, it will really depend on the mayor. So, and how often are they at just functions in around town? So I think part of our rationale is that if it's on official committees, or as Mayor Michael said, to go to the economic development conference, whatever. I mean, can council make a motion that he be approved to go, and then he's approved to go? So that's where we thought the amount that we're suggesting is still a fair amount. Otherwise, how do you know, why would you pay more when you don't, there's no guarantee you're going to get more? Because there's still an ability through the meetings, etc.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Roosevelt. So I have Councilor Magoo and then Councilor Ostashik.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I just want to express my appreciation, same as several councilors have already, to the work that's gone into this report, and certainly the thought, because there's a lot to chew on with the remuneration policy. There's a lot that goes into it. So thanks for your time. Thanks for your consideration. Specifically, the committee put in the report that you would like council to address why either we think one way or another that the mayor's position should either be classified as a full-time position if we decided to keep it that way. And just out of respect for the work that you've done, because I'm not sure if this is the last chance we'll have a bit of face-to-face time, I'd like to express for myself what my personal feelings are on that. You know, reaching back to when this was first discussed with the previous council, my way of looking at things, not having to do with money, but having to do with the classification of the job, is that loving democracy, you know, being a social studies teacher, that's what I do. I want anyone to be able to step into that role and run for it if they want it, right? And I don't care if that's somebody who's self-employed and doesn't have to worry about money, or if it's a single mom who has zero support in the community and they entirely provide for themselves. So however that looks for myself, I want to make sure that that person who has no support is able to take on that job and fulfill that role without having to worry about the children that they provide for, and still contribute to democracy. And the specifics of that I'll work out later. But in terms of that differentiation between full-time and part-time, that's important to me. You know, the case study, the test I always use is what happens if the number one taxpayer in town, West Fraser, says to our part-time mayor, we want a meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning Tuesday because we have some issues to discuss. Is a part-time mayor going to be, who's, working another job to provide for her family, is she going to be able to drop that job and go to that meeting? Most of the time I've seen that test is no. People have schedules they're trying to maintain. And there are just some big names that when they come to town or they want time with the mayor, you're not negotiating that. And so that's always been my area of concern, is the differentiation between full-time and part-time really impacts the availability of the mayor to important people. But again, I really do appreciate, and I really like a number of the suggestions. I'm looking forward to seeing where council goes with it. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate a lot of the things that have come forward in the report here. I do want to take a minute to thank the committee for the work that they've brought forward. It's appreciated. And I do understand the challenges that the committee was presented with. I feel it's important to note, though, that this year is likely a little bit of an anomaly all the way around for a few reasons. One being the changes to the Municipal Government Act that changed when nomination periods were open and made the work of this committee a little bit different than it would have been in previous terms. Timing coming close to the fall was probably perfectly okay previously. Nomination paperwork was submitted on nomination day. Now, with nomination being available as far back as January 1st, that does throw a bit of a wrinkle in there. So I appreciate the suggestion that it be moved forward a year. That makes a lot of sense, because anybody that's considering running for mayor, running for council, will have that information available to them, and we'll go into it with full understanding of what's coming when they do file their nomination papers. That said, though, as I said, I appreciate that it was challenging for the committee, but I want to recognize it's been challenging for everybody. There's been constant pivoting from all facets about all things, even to the extent of this meeting. A week ago, this was a public meeting that we were going to attend in person. Now we're all Zooming in, less than convenient. But it's an example of how everybody in the organization, council administration, and committees have all had to pivot and make changes and make the best of what they could with what was given to them for time, resources, and availability. So I do appreciate that you guys brought a report of this caliber, given the challenges that you were faced, along with the challenges everybody else had. And Mr. Chair, if there is an opportunity for council to continue the discussion and maybe make some changes and directions and discussion about what we're going to do moving forward once all the questions for the committee are complete, I would appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I think with this new format, that's one of the concerns I had is if we do nothing and we just move on, then what would come before us on the 5th, I believe, would be our existing policy as is, because no directions have been made to change it. So I would like that. I think we can continue it with this agenda item unless administration recommends adding an action item. I'm fine either way, but I think as we kind of evolve this process. So what I would look to from council is if you have any questions directly for the committee to get those out of the way, and then we'll let the committee have some supper and we can put a couple motions forward if we see fit. Ms. Caputo?
Yes, I think about the time, like remember about your meetings going over the 4 hours. Like you guys have to have a very serious discussion about that. When you say, you know what, our meeting has to go over 4 hours because at the end of the day, we have to get more pay. But if you as mayor and council decide for, the 0 to 2 hours, that doesn't cause a bigger, it's much easier for you to say, okay, well then we'll be over the 2 hours or over the hour. That I think would make it much easier on you, mayor and council, to be making a decision about this. And I don't know how you would be doing the decision, but myself is that by having that in place, it helps you a lot too, because you don't have to be going, okay, well, we've got another 15 minutes here. What do we do? So that would be my suggestion. It's just a suggestion and a recommendation.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. And I think I can speak for all of council that if we would have had a bit more of our orientation time spent on meetings themselves, it probably would have been very valuable. Council, any other questions for the committee? Great. So for the committee, just thanks for the time that you spent on this report. And we look forward to kind of continue our discussion as council and then bringing some of the recommendations back on the 5th to implement for the incoming council. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
And CAO Olson, would you prefer that council add or interim CAO Howard? I'll get it right one of these weeks. Would you prefer that we add an action item or just continue with the kind of council reporting and make the directions that we see fit?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this would be the place where you now discuss, debate, and make the direction that you want to see this item take. Perfect.
With that, council, and if we could, I don't know, as much as we can get some motions on. We've talked through quite a bit of this already and kind of where we're thinking on stuff. So, Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I'd like to make a direction that we accept the recommended meeting fees be adjusted to what the committee recommended. The 0 to 2 is $75, 2 to 4 hours, $125, and the 4+ hours at $250. I think that's a good place to start anyway. And if I can speak to it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I am definitely in agreement to this. I struggle with the meeting fees as they were, especially when we went into a meeting, it was only maybe an hour or less, and we were at 125. I feel more comfortable with the rates that are set here. I think it also is a better option if we do need to go into a extra 4 hours or over 4 hours, then it's not as a big a hit to the budget that way. So I think this is a reasonable adjustment. So thank you.
Perfect. I'd look to administration to have it up on the board there, just so that we're, and whether we want to recommend that we amend the policy or if we're accepting the changes, whatever format is more sensible for administration.
Mhm.
See that up on your screen, Council?
Yep.
Does that look good to you, Councillor Haas? And is that clear for council and administration?
It's clear to me, as long as it's clear to or the rest of council and administration.
I've got Councillor Ostashik, then Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just did have a question. It's more procedural. I'm in support of the motion, but are we going to go through and accept all the individual recommendations, or since this is a report to council, would it be more prudent to just make the changes we want to change and vote on those? What's the best way procedurally to move forward with that?
Yeah, I think it's 6 of one, half does the other. We're working from the existing policy. And so anything that we're doing now would be an amendment to that policy. So whether it's one way or the other, I'm not sure it makes a huge difference.
If I can follow up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that what we're doing, or are we working from the recommendation that the committee brought to us?
I guess that's up to council. So if we're looking to accept the amended one with amendments to the amended, then we can do that, or we could take the recommendations and amend our current policy. So it's a little bit different with the new reporting style and how we're going about it, with not having that administration component to it. We'll have to kind of figure that out. And go ahead, Councillor Stashik.
If I may, Mr. Chair, what I would prefer personally would be that we move forward based on the recommendations that were brought forward by committee, and that if there's any changes that council wants to make to those, that's what's brought forward and voted on by council. The reason for that, there are a lot of changes in there, and if we're going to go through all of those changes and accept them one by one to amend our existing remuneration bylaw, I think that is going to chew up a ton of time and effort. So I'd look to council for what they think as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So I have Councillor Magoon, Councillor Race, and Councillor Haas.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. That actually addresses my concerns exactly. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, my concern was Councillor Ostashik asking to address admin on that, or the chair. So that was one of my concerns. But I do want to comment on the direction that Councillor Haas has put up. Far too often, we have been at a meeting with several action items still remaining to be discussed, and we've said no because we were fearful of going over that 4-hour minute or the 4-hour mark. And so we've delayed process because we were worried about additional money. So I'm glad you've put that forward, sir.
I think of Councillor Haas and then myself.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Councillor Race, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to probably pull this and withdraw it. I appreciate the conversation. I guess jumped the gun a little bit to figure out what the process is moving forward. This is the first time doing this. So I was just excited for that to be part of the change, but realizing that maybe it's a little premature and, looking at a more effective process. So personally, based on that, I'm willing to withdraw it if there's any, I guess, opposition to that, but I think, based on what I've heard so far, but I see Ms. Hollworth has her hand up there, so maybe she's got some input on that too before I do. So thank you.
Yeah, I think just actually before Ms. Howarth, I just thought I'd share kind of what my thoughts were. We're 2 weeks away from October 5th, which is, our last decision-making meeting of our term. We're already past nominations. So for me, I would actually be way more comfortable taking the 2 or 3 things that are most important to our group and amending the existing bylaw. To make sweeping changes this close to the next term coming in and really not having much time, like we have to pass this on the 5th. I have actually a lot of reservations around that. So to me, I would rather amend the one that we've got with the 2 or 3 most important things. And then the recommendation can form part of what the next group moves forward with. So that's where I'm at, but I too would look for Ms. Howard's feedback, and ultimately it's the will of council on how we want to proceed. So thank you. Ms. Howard?
Thank you. So correct, you can do it either way. We can proceed with it as though it was an administrative report. We would have done the same thing. We would bring a existing document to you. We would show you the track changes. If there were a lot, then we would also add a clean document, which is exactly what's been provided for you now. So you can, so you don't unfortunately have a clean current copy of the policy. You have the current policy with the track changes. You have the policy with the track changes accepted. And so again, in an administrative report, we would bring forward the recommendation to approve it as presented, and then you make the amendments to the presented document. So that process is identical in this case, even though it's coming from one of your boards or committees. So they are presenting you with a proposed document, and you, if you wanted to be consistent with what we do with administrative documents, you work off the presented one and either add things to it or remove it. So that would be my advice to council at this time.
Perfect, thank you. We do have a direction on the floor. Councillor Haas?
So based on that recommendation, it sounds, I think that I would be comfortable with withdrawing that. And then, because it's part of the document and we don't have to approve that part of it. We just look at the rest of it, unless somebody has reason to change it, if that's how I understand it. So based on that, I am comfortable with withdrawing it and then looking at this particular document and then making any motions based on it. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Perfect, thank you. Council, any opposition to withdrawing that? Seeing none, that is withdrawn. I'll turn it back over to council. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I originally had the same thought of working from attachment 2. It seemed kind of intuitive, and then we add stuff. But honestly, we've created this. We've tasked a group to go out and make major changes to this policy. And we're going to say, well, no, we're just going to add some. I'm okay going through the first attachment. I think we can get there both ways, but I think it'll be easier with one. And I do want to respect there's a lot of work put into, there's a lot of red in here. And I want to respect those changes. And if it takes us a little bit extra time tonight and more work to prepare on the 5th, I'm leaning towards attachment 1 is my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Council? Councillor Stashik?
So do we need a consensus of council from how we're going to move forward with this? Are we working on the assumption that we're working on the draft document that the committee provided? Or I just need a little bit of advice. I do have some further action, some further consensus of council I want to seek, but I need to know which way we're going first.
Yeah, I think to me, it feels like council's most comfortable working from the one that's presented and then working from there. To me, the kind of the other hesitation I have is the committee wasn't able to meet with each member of council either. So the only thing that I'm a little bit concerned with is that, and a member of council said it to me, that your voice is really coming through in this report. I think without them having the opportunity to meet with each of us and being on an accelerated timeline, It just gives me a little bit of pause with some of the items, but I think we can take care of that from the report they brought forward, and ultimately what's brought forward on the 5th, we can always amend that again at that time. So if council wants to take the one that's in front of us and work with it, then I think let's just do it. Councillor Sash.
Thank you. Okay, if that's the consensus of council, I do want to seek a further consensus of council. I would like to seek consensus of council to change Schedule A fee schedule honorarium mayor back to $5,000. I don't know if we need to have that brought up, or because I would like to speak to it as well.
I think go ahead and speak to it, and Ms. Rendell can pop it up whenever she's ready there. It's pretty straightforward. Go ahead, Councillor Stashik.
Sure. So I do have a couple of concerns with it being dropped, a pretty substantial amount. As I haven't thrown my hat into the mayoral ring for next term, I'd like to think that I could speak a little bit more impartially than maybe some others could. So my concerns here they're twofold. I was on council when the last remuneration committee came and presented and with some of the reasoning for what they did. My recollection of it, as some of the other councillors have already alluded to tonight, is that the wage that the mayor had been getting previously was a limiting factor in a mayor's ability to be available, but it was also limiting in the sense that many of the potential candidates who would have considered possibly putting their name forward to run for mayor were unable to, because they had work commitments that they knew were going to interfere to the extent that they wouldn't be able to be an effective mayor in their opinion. So that committee at that time said, hey, we don't want any limitations to be put on people externally. If they feel they're a good mayor, they've got the chops to do it, they're interested and they want to put their name forward, we want to make sure as many limiting factors as we can are removed from that. I accepted that, and I thought that was a great justification. Many times, most of the time, committees meet during the day, during the week. A person with a 9-to-5 day job just cannot accommodate the amount of meetings and the amount of requests for meetings that a mayor is brought. Ministerial meetings, ministers, they're full-time positions, that's their day job, so they want to meet during the day. I think it's important that the wage reflects the ability that if that a mayor can make a decision to make sure that they can be available as much as they possibly can. And if they have to hold down a 40-hour-a-week 9-to-5 job, that severely limits it. My second concern is the timing of it. And it's unfortunate. I appreciate the committee did what they could and there was extenuating circumstances. But the fact that this report came back to us so late, and there's a recommendation that basically council saw, and not just council, the public in its entirety, they saw it 2.5 days, I guess, before nominations were due. So that left anybody who was considering putting their name in to run for mayor, or anybody that already had put their name in to run for mayor, to look at this, and they had 2.5 days to decide, Jesus, is this something I really want to do? Can I do this? If I'm elected mayor, am I going to be able to support my family and continue and carry on, knowing that I might have to quit the job that I have now because it doesn't give me the flexibility, and yet the mayor's job isn't going to afford me the opportunity to be able to sufficiently support my family. So that's a concern too. I wish that there had been more time, that this had been something that could happen in the future based on the other recommendations of the committee, that this comes in the 3rd year. So everybody knows exactly what they're looking at, what they're getting into as they move forward. So that's my reasoning for wanting the mayor's honorarium to stay as it currently is. And I'd like to hear what council would like to say on it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stachik. I have Councillor Haas, you were in the queue, correct? So I have Councillor Haas and Magoon. Did you put your hand up right there too? Right, so then Mayor Michaels and Councillor Race. Go ahead, Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm of the same mind. I don't want to handcuff our mayor. And quite frankly, I mean, there's very few, I believe. I mean, I'm not an expert on what jobs are out there, but to have the flexibility that would allow the mayor to attend things. I mean, I work and as Councillor Magoon alluded to, I can't just leave and do, I have schedules, right? And under the circumstances, many, work opportunities have set schedules, and to have a mayor that's handcuffed and unable to attend, granted, yes, there is the deputy mayor, possibility there, but again, depending on, their availability. So I really prefer for having a more hands-on mayor, more available, and who can still, provide for, themselves and their family, depending on the circumstance. And I too, as Councillor Stashik said, as much as it plays a part in this, is that, we are making a decision on someone's wage, based on what it was to now reducing it. And that's, I believe, unfair at this point. I think, and it is unfortunate, but it is the reality that we have in our place right now. So, but that's my feeling. I just feel that, even the comment made about under the economic times, and we don't drop the councillors, but we drop the mayors. I guess I struggled with that in myself in the report. I mean, we're all going through economic times of many sorts, and to reduce a wage that substantially is going to hinder, I believe, the person in that position. So I'll be speaking in favor of this, and thank you, Councillor Sachet, for bringing it forward, because I think it's the right thing to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Mayor Michaels, then Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to thank Councillor Stashik for bringing it up, because it is a bit awkward. Thank God I'm not acclaimed. It would make it worse if that was the case. So at least we have some competition. So it's not for sure. I'd like to find a balance here. And Councillor Magoon first brought it up, a great point. It's opening this position, and Councillor Stashik reiterated it, opening this position to everyone is extremely important part. Now, the fact that there's a huge discrepancy between 35, 50, and 5,000, I believe there's an opportunity to at least meet somewhere in the middle, 4,500, 40. That's still $54,000 a year plus the meeting fees. Now, benefits are included. The town of Hinton will pay. I think that is a fair wage, and we still incorporate, 4 people who presented to us that wanted a drastic, or not a drastic cut, a lower cut by 25%. I think at 5,000, I feel like I can't support it. I see the points. I think $4,500 a month gets it there and really sets up the future councils, not just next one, of what that standard is, and there'll be some consistency. So I would like for this to go down 10% from the 5,000. That would be my preference. And so just sharing my thoughts. Thank you.
So Councillor Race, then Councillor Waugh, then myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate what Councillor Stashik, Councillor Haas have said, and also our mayor. But I think not, 30 minutes ago, my mayor said he'd be okay with 4,000. And I think 4,500 is a good number. So I cannot support the direction given. Thank you.
I have Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I had to choose between 5,000 and the drop to 3,800, I'd be more likely to support 5. My mindset was similar to Mayor Michaels, though I think there might be something in the middle. With that in mind, we have to take into consideration that the mayor's compensation is also going to be affected by the reduced meeting fees already. So I don't know where I'm going to land on this exactly, but I know I'm far more in favor of the 5,000 than the 38, especially considering the reduced meeting fees for all involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. For me, this is one I really struggle with, largely due to the timing, but I would be in support of the motion, and I would really look for some better definitions of a few of the things, and maybe even setting some expectations for what the mayor's position entails. But I look at, things in Schedule A, like independent work with businesses, residents, other organizations to be more familiar with the issue, program, town initiative, or facility. I think there's quite a few meeting fees that, if that was better defined, could potentially fall under there. And especially to me, if it is part of the mayor's day-to-day, i.e. it's, a CMHC committee meeting that's not an official committee of council, and it's at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday, like I don't, to me, that's something that probably shouldn't qualify and shouldn't be part of that meeting fee document. So I think with maybe a little bit different definitions or just a different interpretation of definitions, I think likely that total dollar amount would reduce anyways without reducing that flexibility. So at this time, I would support the motion. I wish we had more time. It's a really weird spot to put any potential candidate in, knowing that it could change at any point. And ultimately, I probably should have followed up earlier on this matter with a notice of motion, not just kind of via email. So I think we have to own that this came late as well as a council. So council. And seeing nobody in queue, if we could just have that consensus brought up on the screen. All right, so I'll call to question that committee recommend that council maintain the mayor honorarium at $5,000 per month. All those in favor? Opposed? So Race and Michaels opposed, and that is carried. Council, anything else we would like to see changed in this document? Councillor Haas?
It's not a change per se yet, it's a question, and then we'll see how it goes. It's to administration. Let me just, it's in regards to reviewing the timesheets. It's under section 3.2.2. And I guess my question is, because during the conversation we talked about administrative assistance. It's not worded or added in here. Is that required in addition to what is here, so that it's clear that administrative input is, or guidance is required, or is that a given, I guess, before I would.
Ms. Howarth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Hawes. So council does always have the access to the administrative assistant to sort of do the gathering of that information. And so the sort of portal for council and mayor to timesheets, receipts, things like that could remain the way that they are right now. And then whenever that document is ready, it would be given to the mayor or the deputy mayor to sign. And so they wouldn't necessarily have to be the person chasing everybody down, collecting the paperwork, cross-referencing. It is an excellent point that it is administration's responsibility to know whether all of the things comply with all of our policies and bylaws. And on one hand, they can be quite simple, and yet we consistently find ourselves in positions over the many years that we're just not sure where something should land, and it does take a little bit of legwork to figure that out. The other thing is also that in terms of signing timesheets and confirming expense claims, I would have to double check to see what authority council members have in our financial authorizations to sign off and have signing authority. Now, certainly the mayor has signing authority in terms of one of the designated people for contracts and things like that, but that did make me pause when I was listening to the committee review that. So I'm not sure if that's something we can just work offline right now. If there's anybody in administration that can just double check whether that is true or not, or maybe council themselves knows. Sorry, my apologies, I don't know that well enough to know whether council individually has the authority to approve each other's timesheets and have that signing off. That is actually what administration does at an administration level. When we approve timesheets and expense forms, that is what that signature means, is that I have the authority to approve that. So not that it couldn't be done, it's something that could be perhaps added to our fiscal policy, but right now that fiscal policy applies largely to administration thresholds. Thank you.
And just to make sure we're catching it, Councillor Haas, there's also section 3.3 that does speak specifically to liaising with the mayor, deputy mayor to resolve timesheet or expense reimbursement discrepancies. So there is something that does specify that administration does have a role to play. But yeah, beyond that, go ahead, Councillor Haas.
No, and I appreciate that. And if it's included enough in here to be clear, but I do appreciate those words, interim CEO Haworth. It never dawned on me that we might not be able to sign off on these types of documents. So I definitely, I'll look to the rest of council, but it would be very interesting before, when it comes on the 5th, definitely having that information at hand to know for certain that we are even able to do that. And then if so, what would it entail to create that opportunity, or so what are some other options? So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to follow up on that one too, and I wish we had more time to flip this over and consider it and send it back to committee, but we don't. But I mean, just listening to that conversation brings up some more questions in my mind. What about mayor, deputy mayor availability? There's a limited time window between the time that timesheets are submitted and that they have to go for payment. And if mayor, deputy mayor happens to be on holidays, what's the mechanism for somebody who's signing in their place? The deputy mayor can't be signing to approve their own timesheet. So that would need to be addressed too, in my mind. So I've got lots of concerns with that part, and it's not because I'm concerned about the principle of it, because my understanding is that is how it's done in lots of other municipalities. However, pivoting this quickly, as interim CAO Howard said, there's other aspects of the organization that are affected by making a change like that, in terms of there could be other bylaws. Anyway, there's just a lot more there than what initially meets the eye in making a change that seems as simple on paper as that one. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you. And, I've spoke to this, I think, indirectly before. Outside of the practice currently of the municipality of who in administration processes timesheets to actually make it, appear into bank accounts, there's the logistics of HR and personnel and payroll, which councillors are not a part of. Beyond that, I have some huge concerns about bringing in councillors into that loop and making them responsible legally, signing off on other councillors' timesheets. There is all of a sudden a level of legal responsibility, I think, is implied by signing off on somebody else's timesheet that I, certainly as a councillor, it's a unique position. And I would feel that there's some potential legal complications between one councillor signing off on another councillor's timesheet. I mean, let's go to the extreme in another community that doesn't exist and say, yeah, you have councillors signing off on each other's timesheets, and one of them, is less than ethical, and they claim hours that they never actually attended in terms of committee meetings. Well, how is Councillor A, who's signing off on that timesheet, supposed to know with any sort of due process? So now they've put themselves at risk, and they've done it on behalf of the municipality. I can't even begin to think of the legal ramifications there. That seems overly complicated for me. I think this is one area of recommendation that I would be far more comfortable keeping the same. Now, if it was the desire of next council to dig a little bit deeper into this particular area and see what's the best practice in other communities. I actually think that that's something that is very reasonable for a council of the day to, involve themselves with, and not wait for the remuneration committee, because I don't think it really intrinsically affects how much they're being paid. It's really a matter of procedure and policy. I would be comfortable with that. And again, as I've said to my past counselors, not only with this council and previous council, I don't believe that counselors themselves should be filling in the timesheets for the hours that they visually appear on camera. There is a legal record that should be kept standard that indicates visually when each counselor was in that meeting. And I don't think there should be a political or personnel element to it. It's recorded. And those times, according to when, a meeting starts and it finishes, is when a counselor is in the meeting and when they leave, that's what should be reflected truly by the timesheet. Having 6 or 7 different people fill in potentially different times, I feel, and I'm only speaking for myself, that creates some potential complications as well. So those are some areas of concern with this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Magoon. I would just say there isn't any direction on the floor right now. And I would say if we want to impact that change, we could probably do that. I have Mayor Michaels and then Councillor Hawes.
My apologies. I'm good for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councillor Hawes.
I guess based on this conversation, interim CEO Howarth, I agree with Councillor Magoon. I think it's something to definitely explore, and I agree with Councillor Stashik that I think this needs more time to iron out it. And so, is it legislatively possible that we don't include this? But how would you recommend going forward to recommend to the next council who can have more time to kind of hash this out before, and understand it a little or more in depth? Because I think there's some valid points. I think there's some valid points that the committee made, and of course, and points that we've made this evening, but maybe somehow coming to some sort of compromise, that's maybe a little bit in between both. I just don't think, we don't have the time to do that right now and go to legal or whatever we need to do. So what do you recommend doing with this at this time?
CEO Howarth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Hawes. So you have a couple things you could make a consensus direction with a sort of a very long end date on it, whether you can kick it right out to if you do decide to go to a 3-year, in your 3rd year term to revisit this, that means you could direct that committee to address that and consider that point. Of course, anytime in between your terms, this policy you can take a look at this policy. It doesn't only have to be done once a year, but it has to be done at least once a year. And so you could just put it to the next council for their discretion to decide when they want to explore that further. Or if, depending on how many of these come out of this discussion, if there's 1 or 2, we may be able to come back to you with some of the implications of just this one or a couple other ones, but you're just barely getting through your document now, and certainly we could not get that turned around for your October 5th. So you could put a placeholder on that for now and wait to see how this item shakes out, and if the rest of it's nice and clean and you're just looking for 1 or 2 sort of advice, deeper dive into a couple things, we could probably do that for your October 5th decision meeting.
Thank you, Councillor.
I may just add one more thing. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Howard.
You could also make this change, and then that would prompt us to have to bring back the current policy to include council had to have those authorities to do the timesheets and having that sort of financial level signing authority for just this this scope. And so then we would just bring the correspondent policy that I believe it would belong in to the next council to basically clean that up so that these 2 policies are in compliance. It's a bit of a chicken and egg, so you could do it either way.
Thank you, Ms. Howarth. Councillor Haas, do you have anything directly to add to that? Okay, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you very much. And to follow up on interim CAO Howarth's comments, and please feel free to give your opinion, just trying to find a way to capture that. If a counselor was to put forward a recommendation from committee that draft policy section 3 reflect that is the responsibility of administration to review and process timesheets and expense sheets of council as per current policy, would that capture that, I suppose, feeling, that goal?
Go ahead, Sarah Howarth.
Thank you. Yes, that we could do it that way, and then if there's the opportunity to bring the other connected policy in front of council, and there typically is opportunity for that because they get revisited within 3 years. That one's probably in the queue to get before the new council anyway. And so that way, whenever that new policy gets changed, you would not have to change this policy because it would just be whatever the permissions are in your financial sort of policy, it would automatically apply to this one. And then you would have to go back and forth and change both. So it's an excellent suggestion.
Yeah, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And then, so I think I'll put that on the floor for discussion and to see if we can do something for it. So whenever administration's ready, I can speak that out, but I'd like to make that. And actually, to make things easier, I can put it in the chat. I don't know if that helps administration.
Sure.
Sure. There we go. So I've put the direction into the chat. That committee recommend that the draft policy section 3 reflect that it is the responsibility of administration to review and process timesheets and expense sheets of council as per current policy. And Mr. Chair, may I speak to that briefly? There won't be too much. Yeah, I think this is one area where I'm all for looking into it, but I think the legal and the fiscal complexities around, finances, logistics, and law, I would feel a lot better having a more well thought out exploration of those areas. And I think right now this is something safe. We know it. It works. It works for the municipality. So let's keep it as is, status quo. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas, and then myself.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Magoon. I'll be speaking in favor of this. I just think there's too much unknowns right now, and I really believe that making a decision like this without knowing those unknowns, we're setting up the next council for headache potentially. I agree. I agree that I think we need to look into it to her better potential process. I do believe, though, on the other side of things, it's worked really well. I really believe I think the one major thing, if I may speak to, is when we cleaned up the difference between those consecutive meetings and all those things, it made a major difference. There was less question. And I think really that was the biggest question mark beside, previously that had to be addressed by administration, and we've cleaned that up. So I definitely, would recommend, moving down the next council to take a look at it deeper and have more time, but I'll be in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I won't be in favor of it. We changed this earlier in our term to switch from Director of Corporate Services to the CAO. And I think we could take it the other step forward. Lots of municipalities do it. The concerns about having a fellow elected official review it, to me, is actually, from a governance, transparency, and accountability standpoint, better than requiring our one employee to make a call of an interpretation of a policy. And to me, that's not, it puts the employee in a far worse position than it does a member of council, because that employee works for the people who are doing those timesheets. So with that in mind, if this passes, it'll be status quo, and that's okay. But I would like to see it be done through those that aren't working underneath the people of which they're approving. So thank you. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do share the concerns that Councillor Nelson's put forward too. I agree. Those are concerns that I have too. And as I said before, I know that there are other municipalities that that do it that way, that they're holding each other accountable. I personally feel that would probably be preferable, the preferred way to do it. However, I am speaking in favor of this motion and will be supporting it simply because we just don't have the time to get into the intricacies of it to be able to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. This is something that I really hope that the next remuneration review committee takes a good look at and brings some recommendation to next council that makes sense to bring it into alignment and get rid of any potential conflicts of interest that might exist in the current format. But for the time being, status quo is what I'm going to support, and I do support the motion. Thank you.
Council, anybody else? We do have a direction on the floor. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm extremely torn with this one. The argument on the one side that we don't know everything is true. It's 100% true. And you could add that other municipalities do it this way. So it's not like we're doing something that's unique, which therefore would draw a red flag that if we're the only one. But my sense is I'm comfortable supporting the recommendation if there was the word review. Again, before I was more concerned with administration's input in helping out the mayor, deputy mayor. If the director of corporate services is responsible for a review and then we have to sign off on it, but they're reviewing it, which puts some onus on what they that they're okay with it. So basically it's a double check. It's they're okay that it's within policy, and then the mayor, deputy mayor with signs off on it. I'm comfortable going that way and maybe fixing any kinks later. Again, this is a more challenging one, but with that being said, I will not be supporting this in hopes that we can find a better solution to put the onus on us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I have Councillor Ross. Do you have something new to add?
Yeah, if I may, I guess my only concern, I agree with what councillors are saying. I think we do have that accountability, and I agree with the change in review would change some wording in there, but it's still that point, that signing off authority that I don't have that information, Mayor Michaels. I can't say for certainty right now, and neither can in administration, that we even have that authority, that we can even put it in a document yet and have that authority. Without that information, I don't see we can change that until we know that. And then based on the time frame we have, I just can't support this. I agree wholeheartedly. If the word was review with administration, great, but we're still signing on it, and I can't say for certainty that we can even do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McGoon.
Yeah, thank you. And, I guess here's my question. I'd be happy to sort of change my viewpoint on this, but, can anyone either in council or administration guarantee, and again, I'll use an extreme case study, but, policy is built on extreme case study. So if I'm acting as deputy mayor and a councillor falsifies a document, am I safe from fiscal responsibility or legal indemnity? And I mean, we've had a committee of council review this, but I don't see any legal input on this. I see nothing that guarantees me the concerns that I have. If that's available, great. But until I have something that says no, other councillors don't put other councillors into any kind of legal risk or situation like that, then I have to stick with the status quo.
Thank you, Councilor McGoon. We do have a direction on the floor, and if we need to make a direction to seek more information in the future or postpone it pending a report, we have all those. I just don't know how far we want to get down the path of lots of different hypotheticals when we have the tools to go and get that information and seek a report if we need. So I have Councillor Waugh, then Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be supporting this as is for now with status quo for a lot of the reasons that people have already stated. There's just too many unknowns and variables that we don't have answers to. I would, after this though, support a motion to direct administration to come back with what's required to implement or what the ramifications are of implementing what was recommended by the committee, and give them a pretty generous timeline in order for them to get that done so the new council can consider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It'll be the last time I speak to this, but I want to clarify my point. We have legislative services here too to make sure that these things are accurate. So if administration finds out that this does not happen, that could be brought to council and that could be changed if it's not allowed. So that's the one principle. And the direction I would provide if this does not pass is in section 3.4. I like Director of Corporate Services is responsible to review and recommend. And then therefore, with reviewing and recommending, which is what they were doing before, then that puts the onus on just the acceptance from the mayor and deputy mayor. And without review and recommend, I would fall on this, on the other option, which is what the motion is. I would support that over. But with review and recommend, I think we're solid enough with Ledge Services to be able to bring this forward to us. Again, it won't have a huge impact. So at the end of the day, it won't be catastrophic, but that's my preference and that's my final thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. All right, so seeing nobody in queue, I will call to question. The committee recommend that the draft policy section 3 reflect that it is the responsibility of administration to review and process timesheets and expenses of council as per current policy. All those in favor? Opposed? So Michaels and Nelson opposed, and that's carried 5-2. Thank you, council. Any other questions, feedback, direction for the remuneration policy? Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like the committee recommend amending section 4.6. I don't know if it's 4.6.3 because they cross off the 7. So it says the mayor may attend that section. Sandra. 4.6.3 to read, the mayor may attend the FCM and AUMA conference yearly and the Municipal Leaders Caucus and EDA, yeah, pardon my grammar, all 3 and then yearly for those. Leaders Caucus happens more than once, that's why. But and if I can see what I mumbled through and what you got, Sandra, we could. And EDA yearly, and you can take away the other yearly. And if I may speak to it, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you. I know I had already mentioned the importance. I think every mayor should be going to EDA every year. And if we're progressing into putting more focus and attention on transparency and accountability and following where these expenses are. And in my 4 years of being the mayor, those expenses, $3,000 a year for any mayor, will be gone quickly because it includes all additional events, meetings. So if I have a meeting in Edmonton with a minister, and there's a hotel charge, that counts towards it. So currently, without those, it's $250 a month for professional development, and all my meetings or all the meetings for the mayor come from that. So that to me will I think leave quite quickly. And an EDA conference might cost about $1,000, which is a third of the budget. So to me, I think we'd be putting any mayor, if this is totally accounted for every dollar, hotel, gas, meals, for all meetings with professional development, I think mayors will eventually hit the point where it won't be approved. You're at $250 a month. Those expenses just leave quickly. To me, that's the flexibility. And also it puts the onus, and I believe that personally that mayors should attend EDA, and this is a good way for them to say, okay, it tells me to go to Leaders Caucus, it tells me to go AUMA, it tells me to go to FCM, and it tells me to go to EDA. So that's my overall intent. And thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. So I was reviewing Councillor Ostashik. If anybody else had their hand up, I probably missed you. And then Councillor Race. Go ahead, Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarifying question. Sorry, Mayor Michaels. AUMA wasn't previously addressed in that clause, and I'm just wondering, well, a couple things. What the intent was of including AUMA in there specifically, and how council's attendance at AUMA is handled right now. I'm assuming it comes out of the professional development budget, but if I could get some clarification on that, I would appreciate it. So that's probably for Mayor Michaels and administration, I guess. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, it took me a little bit to figure out, but attachment 2 is just a hybrid of our current policy. And if you look at our current policy that was updated in, I think, August of 2020, which isn't provided here, there's a section 4.4 lays out all that, and that's been omitted. And in section 4.4 of our current policy, and that's what I was looking at, it says meeting fees and related expenses apply to the following conferences, conventions, seminars, and workshops. My apologies. And it lays down those four, sorry, I'm poorly saying that. There's another section, but in section 4 of the current policy, it says the mayor doesn't include AUMA, FCM, Municipal Leaders Caucus. Mayor's Caucus is also there, but now it's merged into Leaders Caucus. And that's the rationale that it doesn't point here. So technically, to my understanding, and hopefully administration can bring some clarity, if I would attend FCM based on what the version we're working on, it does not say that it would be that would come from my $3,000. And if I attended a Leaders Caucus, that would also come out of my $3,000 because of the current one we're working off doesn't speak to that at all. And the attachments 1 and 2 don't speak to that also. So that was the rationale to add those because they are in our current one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Councillor Stashik, are we relatively clear on that?
If I may, other than the part of where AUMA's attendance is funded for when council attends it.
Yeah, in the previous one, I think it was 5.2, like the one that, like if we just pull up on our policies, like the current one, I think it's 5.2. It says all members of council may attend each AUMA council or conference. So.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Chair. I don't have our current one in front of me and it's not part of this package. So I was struggling to find where it was referenced. Thank you.
Ms. Howarth?
And maybe I'm the one that is mistaken, but I believe you do have your current policy in front of you. It's attachment 1. It's marked up, but it's marked off your current policy. So what Mayor Michaels was referring to about the in section 4.4, you can see 441, 442, 443, and 444. That was what he was making reference to. That is page 10 of your agenda package. So attachment 1, while it looks a little messy, if you can ignore all that, the track changes, that is your current policy. And so if you want to know what it said, and that's where you would track that from, if that assists any of you in further discussing these matters. Thanks.
Thank you. So I have Councillor Race, then Councillor Magoon, then Councillor Haas, and I would just comment the policy that is on our website is actually different than attachment 1 as well. So I don't think that helps helps matters a whole bunch. Councillor Race, I don't see your video on. Are you still there? I'll go past Councillor. Oh, there you are. Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will support the direction from Mayor Michaels. I think it's vital that he attends the FCM, the Leaders Caucus, the EDA. And in saying that, I think it's vital that information that he does attain from those meetings comes back to our council. Another thing that's very, very important for our municipality is that he does meet with provincial ministers, with federal. It's just a plus for our municipality. So I will support this.
Thank you. I have Councillor Magoo and then Councillor Haas.
Sorry, I was just wondering if we could see the current direction just briefly. Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I'm going to support this. It is important that our mayor go to these things, and but I'm also hopefully afterwards too we discuss, because how I understand it is there also this recommendation is going to exclude council members going to the AMA, that will come out of our professional development. And my I understood it in our previous is AUMA is separate from our professional development, that we agreed that we would as a council, for those that can't attend, but it would be covered. And then it would be a separate on other trainings, workshops, whatever. So after this, I hope to see a direction either by myself or someone else to include that as well, because I think that's vital for us as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I have Councillor Magoo.
Yeah, thank you. And I certainly support the motion that's on the floor, but I am just wondering if it's better to approach that by looking at the original section 4.4, where it addresses, meeting fees and what can be provided to mayor and councillors. Currently, the recommended changes directs us to Schedule A, which is the problem that the mayor highlighted. But as Councillor Hawes indicated, that also creates a problem for councillors in relation to AUMA, because I don't believe Schedule A actually identifies AUMA. And the mayor pointed that out during our meeting today. So very supportive of the direction on the floor. I'm just wondering if maybe, again, this is another example of where the way section 4.4 had read originally might be better suited in the meantime than making one-off changes. So thank you.
Yeah, I think we have a couple options. One is to just leave the motion as it stands, or to make it a little bit more generic, so that it can achieve all of those things. But I think we're probably okay if somebody wanted to amend it and have it say and that council can attend AUMA each year. I think that would be fine as well, and it would just be taking out the sections. Because there's a little bit of confusion of which sections it would be anyways, depending on what document you were looking for. So I think council's pretty much on the same page around it. So it's just more of the mechanism than I think the actual decision-making portion of it. Councillor Hawes?
Well, and the other fact too is I believe that we are allowed to go to FCM at least one in our term that's covered. And then if we choose to go to another FCM, that would come out of our professional development, which is excluded in this current document as well. So I'm of the mind of Councillor Magoon too. I think there's so many changes, and we're actually just going back to the original potentially, is that we, potentially just do what we did in section 3 and proceed with, with what it was. I mean, I'm okay with doing the motion and being in favor of it, but we're just going to be making future motions to just include back to what it was before. That's my thought and feeling anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. I would also just comment, we're almost at 6 o'clock and we haven't got to our action items yet. And we have quite a few action items and quite a few closed session items. So if we can really kind of focus in on kind of what we need to do for this to come back in the right way for October 5th. So we do have a direction on the floor. I don't see anybody in queue. Mayor Michaels, then Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think in order to save time, I think there's an appetite to add the amendment to it, and let's just do two things at once if possible. So I think if somebody could amend that. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, if the mayor would be willing to accept a friendly amendment to include and that councillors may attend AUMA and FCM.
Could that friendly amendment also include AUMA annually and FCM once per term?
Certainly.
Thank you. And whenever that's ready, if it could come up on the screen. Mayor Michaels, did you want to speak to that?
No, I'm just in favor with that friendly amendment. Thank you, Councilor Magoon.
Yeah, and I think administration, as they go back and review the policy, can make it so it all kind of works together and makes sense, and especially referencing the existing one. And then if there's some minor tweaks we need to make ahead of the 5th, we can certainly do that. Councillor Hawes?
I'd just like to speak to this real quickly. And for my personal experience, and I, again, respect to the committee and making this recommendation, but to be able to take and have that $3,000 for professional development, the fact of the matter is a lot of these professional developments, AUMA, cost a great deal of money, and I realize their intent of this, but then it excludes the opportunity to have other learning opportunities potentially, and personally been able to use those professional development dollars in the past and found it extremely helpful, learned a lot from different possibilities. And if we were to take the AUMA and FCM out of that 3,000, it just really limits our abilities as counselors to grow and learn and take on those opportunities. So I think that this is the best option. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Hawes. I have nobody in the queue. Can we just get the motion up on the screen? Mayor Michaels, if you want to just have a look and make sure that reflects what you're looking for there.
If it's possible, because I think Councillor Nelson brought up a good point, if I can omit the sections and allow for the flexibility for administration to alter the document with the intent of council, that would be my preference, because then it just makes for. So thank you for that, Councillor Nelson, and if that's okay.
Yeah, that doesn't change the intent at all. So okay. Just wait for that to.
And yeah, just amending the bylaw or the policy. Thank you for that, Sandra. Also, thank you.
Perfect. So we have a direction on the floor. I'll call the question that committee recommend amending draft policy to include the mayor may attend the FCM conference, AUMA conference, the municipal leaders caucus, and EDA annually, and that councillors attend AUMA annually and FCM once per term. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, council. Councillor Waugh? Oh, you were still voting? Sorry, thought your hand went back up. Council, any other changes we'd like to see to this draft policy before we see it on the 5th? Yeah, and I think administration maybe be prepared for a few edits on that day, and possibly council, if you're thinking about making some edits, emailing them ahead of time might help administration with the structure. With this being quite marked up and a lot of this being new to us, I could see there being a few other things that that likely need to change on the 5th. So thanks, everyone. Let's take a 6-minute recess. We'll come back at, oh, Ms. Howarth.
Did committee want to make a direction? Did I miss that to actually bring it forward to the 5th as amended?
Yeah, I would look for that. I've seen it on the agenda prep, so I'm in my head assuming it's already there. So yeah, Councillor Hawes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion that we bring this remuneration, I guess, policy as amended back to the October 5th regular meeting of council.
Great, council. Any discussion or debate? So I'll call to question that the remuneration policy come back to the October 5th regular meeting of council. All those in favor? Opposed? See none, that's carried unanimously. And now we only have a 5-minute break. 6:06 is still the time. All right, I'll call this meeting back to order at 6:07. That takes us to our first action item, which is tax penalty bylaw, and I'll turn it over to you, CAO Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to the rest of council. So this first action item in front of you tonight is the tax penalty as well as the tax installment payment plan bylaw. You have attached the current bylaw 800-1 that was last reviewed in 1995. And as you can imagine, there have been a few significant organizational and legislative changes since then. Most significantly is the addition of the tax installment payment plan, the TIP program. So that's what's prompted this review. It's a fairly short document, replacing another very short document, but it aligns now with both what we've been practicing for quite a while, and again, all the new organizational and legislative changes that have come along. We've also done a comparison with the review of the Municipal Government Act, so this is now in compliance with all of those. So the tax penalties they're really that tool that municipalities use to promote the collection of taxes. So it's that broad scale, I guess, sense of collecting the taxes on a timeline that's required by the municipality. So we set those dates being July 1st, another penalty of August 1st, another penalty of July 1st of the following year, to be sure that the municipality can collect the taxes that they have set their spending to in a timely manner. And so basically that's the premise of what's being proposed tonight. The penalties themselves remain unchanged, so that is not the topic of the change tonight. It's simply all of the language and the legislative pieces around that, and particularly around that piece with the tax installment payment plan, because since we've been doing that, there's been that provides the opportunity to the public to basically pay their taxes in 12-month increments. So pay the 6 months up front, and then there's no penalty when they still owe the second half of the year. And that's provided that relief that was previously in the 1995 bylaw, where there was that discretion of administration to try to determine, who could and how they would pay their taxes at a time later than when they were due. So the recommendation before committee is to direct administration to bring the tax penalty and tax installment payment plan bylaw to the October 5th regular meeting. And you'll notice in the recommendation is that it's to receive all three readings. And the intent of pointing that out is, of course, if this comes on the 5th and does not receive all three readings, then it will default to having to come back to the incoming council, back to this stage, bringing the draft in front of them, and then we will bring all three readings to the next one. So if there's any sense at all that, and again, of course, council definitely has their total authority to change their minds from tonight and what happens 2 weeks from now, but if there's a sense that you're not feeling comfortable with it even tonight, then we have an option for you to simply defer it right to the incoming council. And I have Mr. Rob Osmond, the author of the report here, with me to assist in answering any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, CEO Howarth and Mr. Osmond for bringing this together. I have Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So typically the town knows at the end of June how much tax money they've collected. And then when they go into their budget deliberation, they have that amount of money to talk about. So if we're not collecting all of it until the end of December, is that hindering any of the budget talks?
Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Race. No, because we collect the current year, so the taxes that we are collecting in 2021 fund the budget for 2021. And so when we start for now in fall, in the winter here, go into our budget, that is setting the program service levels, budget, operating and capital are all for a future year. And so once those are established and approved by council, then that's what sets our tax rate bylaw and all the work that has to be done in spring in those sometimes tight timelines to meet the legislation around that. So it does not impact the current year, it impacts the current year, not the future years of budget deliberations.
Mr. Osmond, did you have something to add to that?
No, I think that's really the picture there, is that they're two separate processes, and they don't need to interfere. The collection is an independent activity. And so the penalties speak to collection of taxes, and the budgeting speaks to the planning of the financial expenditures for the year.
Great, thank you, Mr. Osmond. Councillor Race, did you have any follow-up?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Perfect. Councillor Haas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Osmond, I like the headphones a lot better than the last ones. I appreciate that. So I'm gonna have to get a real close up of you this time. So I just questioned, and I heard Interim CEO Haworth mention, tonight is not about the percentage, it's about the bylaw itself. And I get that. I guess my question then is, when would be then the conversation about potentially the percentages? Because I'm not sure if this is a standard percentage or if this is something that, or, you know, but if there was appetite to change those, when would that conversation potentially take place? After the bylaws passed, basically, and then next council, or?
CEO Howarth?
So, and I apologize if I insinuated at all that you couldn't discuss those and that couldn't be done tonight, because the entire bylaw is in front of you tonight. But what has prompted us to bring it in front of you is not either a past contention or concern from, you know, this council or previous council. The issues weren't around the percentages; they were around cleaning up the other things. But I would expect that you could discuss any and all of this right now, and I would invite Mr. Osmond, if I can, just to speak to whether these are typical percentages and what they're maybe based on.
So
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
But just before we get down that path, my only concern is if we start talking about the percentages of the tax rate bylaws, whether or not we would be able to pass all three readings. So to me, that requires a lot of public consultation. So just keeping that in mind with passing all three readings. Otherwise, you know, if we're talking about tax rate changes, we might want to just postpone this discussion completely to the next council. So just keeping that in mind. Mr. Osmond?
And if I may, I appreciate that. I guess just some understanding around it, because I think if it's not tonight and it's not on this conversation, I think it does have to come at some point. I guess I'm just not certain whether it's even necessary, because maybe this is a standard percentage that we're looking at. So thank you, Mr.
Osmond?
Yeah, and just for clarification, the only pieces that are covered within the tax penalty bylaw are the penalties themselves. The tax rates are covered in a separate bylaw. Okay. So when it comes to tax penalties, there's really two schools of thought that you see in municipalities. The one method, which is the one used for the town of Hinton, is that there are kind of 2 or 3 penalties used throughout the year. They tend to be larger percent values. And the reason for that is to put additional impact on payment by those key dates. So payment by the tax due date is, of course, ideal for the municipality, because that's the number around which we plan all our cash flows for the year. And then the other date that's critically important is the financial year end at December 31st. So immediately following those 2 dates, you will see penalties. In this case, Hinton also uses a third penalty on August 1st. But so you see that, that's probably the most common. There are a number of municipalities, however, that choose to do smaller penalty values, but they're applied monthly. So often there's 10 penalty or 12 penalty dates every month. On the first of the month, you would see maybe a 2.5% penalty. That's a fairly common collection tool when you're dealing with other receivables. But in terms of taxation, it's the other method commonly used by municipalities, but it is far less common. In terms of the values themselves, typically looking at a 15% combined penalty on current taxes and another 15% on arrears is quite common. There are some municipalities that will get a little more aggressive with the initial penalty. Sometimes you'll see that July and August penalty combined into a single penalty on July 1st. And sometimes you'll see that arrears penalty on January 1st be a little bit more to put some more weight on it. There is quite a bit of variation, but that would be the general trend. In terms of speaking to the values, my recommendation would be you have to open up the bylaw to do that. And because there are changes in front of council, this might be a time if council is considering looking at those numbers. If that's the case, it can certainly be done. It is a bylaw under the finance division in the MGA, so it's non-petitionable. So you don't have some of the advertising requirements, but internal practice might lead council to seek other input, things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Osmond. Councillor Haas, do you have any follow-up to that at all? Perfect. And just for council's knowledge, if we're making substantive changes to this bylaw, I won't give it all 3 readings. We haven't. If we're going to talk about our penalties and our penalty rates, to me, that should be part of a budget conversation, which we're not having in the next month. So for me, I would encourage us to stay really on the administrative part that we just need to get solved today from an expired or a really old bylaw. So I've got Mayor Michaels, then Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a different train of thought. We have an opportunity now to change it now. I wouldn't be in favor of changing something drastically, but our neighbors east of us have a 6% initial fee in Edson. For us, we've encountered at council many people who, for different various reasons in the first week or two, said that they just didn't pay their taxes, something happened, and there's no discretion for administration to waive those fees. So they come to council, and it puts council of the day in an awkward position to just have a status quo that we just don't entertain almost any of them, because if you do it for one, you have to do it for all. I personally strongly feel that the penalty for July 1st and August 1st should switch. I would prefer 5% and 10%. So by August 1st, you're still accumulating the same amount of money in penalties, but it gives an opportunity for our residents to just pay the smaller fee on July 1st, but knowing that there's a larger fee in a month later. So any anomalies or people who want to pay their taxes are hit a little bit less, but at the net result for us, we'd be collecting the same 15%. So that's my train of thought, because I don't want to go into the bylaw. I would like a provision for administration to have discretion, perhaps on the first level, based on what they would deem. But I do agree, we're on a time crunch, so I don't want to get down that. But the one amendment I do want to do is that. So I'll give an opportunity before I put something forward to the rest of council. But my intent tonight is to switch from 5 to 10% for July 1st and August, respectively. Thank you.
Councillor Magoon, and then myself.
Actually, I'd like to withdraw at this time, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. For myself, knowing what Edson does beside us, we don't always need or want to do what Edson does. And to me, if we're looking at making changes that could have a pretty big impact on citizens and on our budget and how we're collecting taxes, I would want a report and some background information to that. This hasn't come up in 4 years up until recently, and to me, I just don't know the purpose of sending them in to bring a report, and then without a report and knowing what the implications are, I also then wouldn't support all 3 readings. So really, it's obviously up to any member of council to make any amendments as they please. But to me, we had one thing to achieve on this report, and we're kind of changing now what the expectations are, and I think that's what I'm struggling with a little bit. But I don't have anybody in the queue, Mayor Michaels, if you did want to make that amendment. Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to, the committee amend or direct administration to amend section 3.2 to reflect a July 1st rate of 5% in an August 1st rate of 10%. And if I may speak to that, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
I agree conceptually that we need a report for things that I think are more challenging, difficult. This is an incentive for people to pay their taxes, quite simply. To me, perhaps we need to do more decision making on this. And I'm not saying that there's no implications at all, but this is fairly straightforward. We haven't yet budgeted 2022. This would be already, if passed, administration would know, and it's a target. They don't know how many people won't pay their taxes in 2022. So to my knowledge, it's a challenge to budget for that income anyway. So to me, I think we're overthinking this. These are simple rates to incentivize. We're flipping it for a conceptual reason. And I don't think there's almost any impacts. Now, if administration brings up any red flags or glaring parts to changing this that will throw the organization upside down, absolutely, then I'll consider it. For me, this is solving one conceptual problem, which is being easier on the residents on missing their first payment, but yet being harder on the second one, which I strongly believe this could be done easily. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Council, we do have a direction on the floor. Seeing no one in queue, if that could be brought up so I can call it to question.
All right, we just need batteries for a dead mouse in order for us to switch screens there. I might be able to give her mine. Just 1 minute here. Sorry, Council, we're gonna need about 5 minutes to.
Are we able to just put the motion in the chat box and then I could just read it that way?
Okay, we could try. We could.
All
Yes.
right.
Okay, we're all right.
Awesome, thank you. I'll call to question the committee direct administration to amend section 3.2 of the bylaw number 1164 to reflect a July 1st rate of 5% and August 1st rate of 10%. All those in favor? Opposed? Sorry, Councillor Haas, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't see anything there. I needed it to switch over first. Sorry, my apologies.
Okay, if that could just come up again and I'll recall it to question. So I'll call to question that committee direct administration to amend section 3.2 of bylaw number 1164 to reflect the July 1st rate of 5% and an August 1st rate.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yep, absolutely.
There's no mover indicated on that motion.
That was Mayor Michaels. So I think it's been noted that it is Mayor Michaels and admin can sort out the technical difficulties, but I will call to question that committee direct administration to amend section 3.2 of bylaw number 1164 to reflect the July 1st rate of 5% and August 1st rate of 10%. All those in favor? And opposed? Sorry, Councillor Stashik, you were in favor, correct?
I was, sorry, the
Perfect.
technical difficulties. I was in favor. I was waiting for the screen to switch though. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, I have you kind of on my side. So that was carried 6-1 with Nelson opposed. And council, I am able to see everybody with that screen still up. I don't have anybody in the queue. Michaels?
Now I'm having technical difficulties too. Something is wrong at the building, I think, maybe. I'd like to direct that council direct administration or committee direct administration to bring the tax penalty and tax installment payment plan bylaw 1164 to the October 5th, 2021 to receive all 3 readings.
We can't put that in the chat box or up on the screen right now. Apologies, council. We're just cancel the screen that's in front of you right now. So we'll, if you want to take a 5-minute break, or you want to finish this item off and then we'll take a 5-minute break. It's up to you.
I think because the direction that's being given is the one in the recommendation, I'm comfortable. We can add that in there as we have our technology back. So Mayor Michaels made the direction that committee direct administration to bring the tax penalty and tax installment payment plan bylaw number 1164 to the October 5th, 2021 meeting to receive all 3 readings. I will speak to it briefly. I won't be in favor of all 3 readings without understanding this better. Mr. Osmond had commented that it's common to have a higher upfront to encourage tax collection. Maybe 1% or 2% is the right number for July, and a higher is the right number for August. Without really much of an opportunity to go out to the public, and with it being outside of the budget process, which is an atypical time for us to talk about things like this, I won't be in favor of all 3 readings, so I will be voting against this recommended action. Council, any other questions or feedback? Seeing none, so I will call to question that committee direct administration to bring the tax penalty and tax installment payment plan bylaw number 1164 to the October 5th, 2021 regular meeting of council to receive all 3 readings. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried 6-1 with Nelson opposed. Administration, did you need a minute to take care of some technical difficulties?
No, I think we're good. She has, her mouse is working and now mine's not because I gave her my batteries. So high tech stuff here. So no, I think we're ready to proceed. She's just capturing that last motion in her minutes there, so we can certainly start the next item and I can introduce it.
Sounds good. I'll council, nothing else for tax penalty bylaw, I'm assuming. Seeing none, I'll turn it over to administration for the civic agency proposed partnership report. CO Howarth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to council. So in fall of last year, there was the civic partnership policy that was approved, and basically what that did was established how that formalize how the town considers and evaluates and enters into those partnership agreements that provide the funding either or the non-monetary support to the civic agencies for those mutual beneficial initiatives. And so the report before you is primarily an information report that highlights in many sections what each of those agencies are. And then there's a second piece to it that you'll recall back on September 14th, that you had a presentation from the Historical Society for some bridge funding. So administration has continued to have that dialogue with this historically funded civic agencies as required in order to inform this report. So the recommendations in each of the proposed partnership agreements are for those agencies who have been historically funded and who do not hold a current agreement. And so there's that That's being evaluated in the report. We've included things like key performance indicators and some other guiding principles with the aim of ensuring that administration and council have that oversight. And it also demonstrates that financial transparency and accountability because the support that we provide are through public funds. And so the sections on the Hinton Golfing Society, the Chamber of Commerce, Food Festival, the Historical Society, and the Hinton Wheeled Park Association, each of those are in front of you. By accepting this report for information, which is the first half of our recommended direction, that will allow administration to begin drafting agreements with those listed agencies as outlined in the report. And then the second piece is the commitment that committee wanted the item for the possible options for the bridge funding to the Hinton Historical Society allotment for 2021. That is before you as well, and the recommendation is to bring that to the October 5th regular meeting. So again, accepting it for information will set us in motion to establish the agreements. And the separate piece that we added into this civic partnerships report was to give committee the opportunity to address and deal with the Historical Society allotment request. And I have Ms. Way, there she is, online. If there's anything I've missed or you wanted to highlight and speak to in a more robust way, I invite you to do that now, if I may, Mr. Chair. And other than that, we'll go back to the Chair. Thanks.
Great, thank you, administration. Council? Seeing nobody in the queue yet, I did have a question in that how does this kind of relate to the budget process? Understanding that this committee will be making recommendations that could make these groups feel as though that's what they would be getting in the budget, but then it's a different council that will be coming back and forming that budget. So I politically there could be some challenges in making accepting this for information, which basically puts the wheels in motion to something that maybe a future council would have no appetite towards. So just how it relates would be great for some context. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to the rest of council. So yes, these civics agencies come in front of council every budget year, typically in October, but this year it'll be in November because of the budget cycle and the new incoming council. They are aware that every year, unless they have a multi-year agreement, that it's a new ask, and we do make them as aware as we can possibly do that this is, so if it's an ask each time, they're in front of that council at the time, and it's put in context to the total budget and all the other budget decisions that council makes. And Ms. Way, if there was another piece to that, if you want to speak to, thank you.
Thank you, CAO Howard, through to the remainder of council. The only addition I would make to that is that this report is intended to provide guidance to administration in order to draft some agreements in preparation for what you will see when the civic agencies come before you. I have connected with each of them. At the time that I connected with them, these were the dollar amounts that we discussed. However, as we approach those presentations, they may increase, they may decrease. So that section of the agreement really remains blank until after the approval through that civic agency presentation process. But it does allow, through this process, does allow time to prepare those agreements in advance so that should they pass, they'll be ready to go January 1. Thank you.
Very thank you. I have Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's kind of a follow-up to your comment from earlier in relation to the, sorry, I apologize. I just need 1 second. I was searching for what I'm going to refer to, but I can't find it. So I have to get back to my other screen. Sorry. In terms of the Hinton Historical Society, I believe there's an outstanding motion of council regarding the amount that they're annually budgeted for, and that there was a motion from council with a dollar amount attached to it that was made during the budget process that is still applicable moving forward to 2022. So I'm just wondering if council accepts this, how does that affect that previous motion that was made and approved by council?
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. I'll turn it over to administration.
Ms. Wade?
Thank you, CEO Howarth. That motion, unfortunately, is missed in this report as it was not on my action tracker. However, in accepting this report at this moment for information, before final decisions are made, we will make sure that that comes back to a regular meeting to be addressed appropriately through discussions with legislative services. Thank you.
You need to follow up at all, Councillor Ostashik?
No, that's good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Council, I don't have any in the queue. Apologies if I missed anybody. I have Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I will move to that committee accept the Civic Partnerships 2022 proposed partnership report for information and direct administration to bring the Hinton Historical Society 2021 bridge funding request forward to the October 5th, 2021 regular council meeting for decision.
Did you want to speak to that at all, Councillor Magoon?
No, I think in this instance, it's pretty self-explanatory, and we've asked a lot of good questions around it.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we do have direction on the floor. Any questions or debate? Seeing none, I will call to question that committee accept the Civic Partnerships 2022 proposed partnership report for information and direct administration to bring the Hinton Historical Society 2021 bridge funding request forward to the October 5th, 2021 regular council meeting for decision. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Council, anything else for the Civic Agency proposed partnership report item? Right, seeing none, that takes us to council procedural bylaw number 1153. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Howarth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to council. So this item was, council first reviewed the draft council procedure bylaw back in May of this year. And there were a few recommendations and directions that they had proposed. Since then, we have had the legal review on those, and the recommended changes have been incorporated into the draft procedure bylaw that is before you this evening. Overall, there's very few recommendations that we received from legal. One that is probably the most imminent is the one around the committee of the whole meetings, as all committees of council must be formed by bylaw. And right now, that the way that we have it structured is a little less like that. So you can, on page 54 of your agenda package, we actually inserted the actual feedback that we received from legal. And I have, of course, Ms. Rendell is here, who's also taking minutes. So as she speaks to her report, if I need her assistance. This is also similar to the other report tonight. If you would like to proceed to October 5th with this bylaw, it would be with the intent to pass all 3 readings. Otherwise, again, you have an option in front of you to push this out to the next incoming council, and we will back it up again to this stage, inform them of how we got to this point, and then they would carry it forward from there. And that's it for now. Thanks.
Great, thank you, administration. Council, any questions or directions? So go ahead, Councillor Stash.
Yeah, if council doesn't have a bunch of concerns with it and is looking at making any amendments or changes or anything, I'd be happy to furnish a motion that is the recommended action. That committee direct administration to bring the council procedure bylaw number 1153 to the October 5th, 2021 regular council meeting for all 3 readings. And if I could speak to it quickly, I think it would be beneficial for this council to pass this before the torch is passed on to incoming council. This would give, sorry, I'm going to back up a little bit. Council, administration, the committee have all invested a lot of time, work and effort into this, which is very much appreciated. I think this is a much better, clearer document for council to be able to refer to so that they've got a really strong, firm, clear knowledge of what their roles and duties are as councillors and mayor. I think it'd be beneficial for new council to come into this with this, come into their term with this already in place. So I would like to see it move forward and hopefully receive all 3 readings on the 5th. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council, if I missed some hands, I apologize. Anybody want to speak to the motion? So I will speak to it. My only question, and it's come up a few times throughout, is around section 16, which is debates on motions. And it completely changes the way that we conduct business as a council, especially around the formality. So it doesn't allow any questions or debate prior to a motion coming forward. It also doesn't allow the chair to take part in debate or discussion without vacating the chair. So that's something I would caution council. If we want to go to that level of formality, then so be it. But I haven't felt like council has wanted to, completely remove the mayor or the chair's voice from the conversation. And I don't know that we want to, at regular council, always put a motion forth before commencing any sort of debate. It just isn't how we've operated to this point. So I would appreciate council's feedback prior to maybe making a motion to amend. Mayor Michaels and then Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be in favor of amending 16.2 quickly and saying that council may not speak to a matter, but may ask questions, right? I think questions is a good format. If we want to go down that line that we don't want to share our opinions and kind of sell something prior to a motion being on the floor, I'm fine too, because I do agree this is a bit more drastic. It's something that we don't follow. So I'd be open to amending 16.2 and then passing it with that intent. Thank you.
Perfect. I have Councillor Haas, then Howarth, and Ostashik. And just for reference, it's also 16.5 as well. So Councillor Haas.
Mr. Chair, sorry if I could just jump in procedurally, just point of procedure. Before we move on, if I may, I just want to address my motion.
Yeah, absolutely.
If there's no opposition, I would gladly withdraw it. I sat on my hands a bit before I put my hand up to put the motion forward, thinking that there likely wasn't going to be any amendments. Now that there is, I'm happy to withdraw it, and a further motion can be put forward after amendments are made to bring it forward as amended. So I'd withdraw, please.
Perfect. Council, any opposition to that? Seeing none, I also sat on my hands as the chair, and I would have to vacate. So with that, Councillor Haas, if it's okay with you, I'll go to Ms. Howarth first, and then to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the author of the report. Ms. Rendell would like to just provide a little information to council for their discussion right now.
Absolutely, much appreciated.
So we had went back and forth a lot on about if a motion had to be on the floor prior to debate. So in our bylaw, when I had sent it in to legal, she said that and as per Robert's rules, a motion has to be on the floor before debate takes place. So legislatively, yes, it does need to be there. I know we haven't been doing it that way, but in Robert's rules, it states it that way. And the lawyer also told us that it needs to be done in regular and special meetings. Committee meetings doesn't matter. You can talk about it before a motion is put forward.
Okay, Councillor Haas, and then
Yeah. So, I mean, I won't die on that fence. I've been actually part of other committees where that is the practice, where there's a motion before any discussion. I am though 16.5, and I'd be interested to hear Ms. Rendell's. The change to where the mayor or chair wishes to join the debate has to vacate. I know we do that during if you make a motion, if the mayor chooses to make a motion, but as to, you know, being part of the debate and the discussion, I would have to hear that that has to be in there, like previously in regards to the motion being on the floor first. So I'm interested in Ms. Rental's view on that. Thank you.
Administration?
That was also added in by when the legal review did it. But we could probably, I was thinking that like we could just change that they could participate in the debate or discussion and just maybe vacate their chair position when they have a motion or are ready to put a motion forward.
If I may, I would feel much more comfortable with that. I think, you know, I mean, I value, you know, that also member of council's view on things, and to have to shift from one chair to the next to have that, I just don't think that's reasonable, you know, in a meeting. So I would like to amend and remove 16.5 altogether.
Are you making that amendment?
Yeah, unless there has to be, we include if it's in a regular to make a motion, and I'm not sure if it's in anywhere else stated in the procedural bylaw at all. But if we have to make that, we'd have to add that in somewhere. But I would like to amend 16.5 being removed.
So the motion is to amend the procedural bylaw, draft procedural bylaw with 16.5 removed?
Correct.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Hawes. I have Councillor Magoon, then Councillor Stashik.
I'd just like to stay in the main queue, please, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I shall make it a second column. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate Councillor Hawes's request, but I unfortunately I can't support removing 16.5 in its entirety, though. Reason being, I feel the mayor or the chair should vacate the chair position if they're going to make a motion. The reason being for that is that the chair controls the conversation around the motion, and if someone were intending to be unscrupulous, they could control the conversation around the motion that they made themselves. So I have no problem with them being able to join debate, but I do have a bit of a problem with them being able to make motions and then continue to chair the meeting. So I would be more comfortable with an amendment to 16.5 to say if the mayor or chair wishes to motion properly before council, ... and just take out the part about joining the debate. But the motion to remove 16.5 entirely, I can't support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, I'm completely amenable to that. I too think that it is important that the chair, if the chair in a regular meeting is choosing to make a motion, I agree, needs to leave that chair, have someone else chair that meeting. I 100% agree with that. I guess it's not in 16.5. So I guess I was of the mind that we get rid of 16.5 and then add, I guess, another 16.5 to include that. But I'm totally amenable to, you know, just getting rid of and tweaking the words that includes that as well. So
yeah, Councillor Haas, if your original intent was just to allow, like, still require it for making motions, it could simply be amended to remove join in the debate on a question, and I think that
and that's fair as long as it cleans up the words and then we don't handcuff the mayor to be joining in the discussion. That's my intent.
With that in mind, if administration can pull it up on the board and just make sure council's comfortable with that as a intent amendment.
In debate on a question. Yes. And I think the word "or" has to come up as well. Sorry, just the word "or" after question. Those are all, yeah.
Yeah, and I think administration would have the ability to fix grammar if that caused a grammar issue. Councillor Haas, does that reflect what you were looking for there?
Yeah, I believe so. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Haas and Councillor Stashik for that feedback. Council, any questions or debate on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, Mr. Randall, could I get that back up on the screen again? So I'll call the question that committee direct administration remove join in the debate on a question, or from section 16.5 from the council procedure bylaw number 1153. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried unanimously. Councillor Race? Councillor Race, could I actually go to Councillor Magoon first? I missed him in the main queue there, so I'll have you right after Magoon.
Yep, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to have a look at 16.2. My concern for council is it identifies that no member may speak or ask questions of an agenda item presenter until a motion being put forward for debate or discussion. To me, that seems almost impossible. There's a number of clarifications that I get from presenters all the time that impact motions that I would put forward. So I would like to seek consensus of committee that committee remove section 16.2 from the draft policy.
Perfect. Did you want to speak to it anymore, Councillor?
No, I think that clarifies things. Thank you.
So Councillor Race, do you want me to keep you in the main queue, or was your question speaking directly to this one as well?
To the main queue, please.
Perfect. I'll have you there. Hopefully I remember this time. And Mayor Michael speaking to this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to go through the bylaw. Does this say that if this is removed, that we would default to Robert's rules would be the next level that we would have to abide by? And the reason I'm asking is if that's the case, because it was the prior case in our past bylaw, by removing it, we would have to follow Robert's rules. So I would prefer an amendment to 16.2 that would say no member may speak to, but may ask clarifying questions previously. But if we don't default to Robert's rules anymore, which I thought we do, that's my question to administration as I'm looking. Thank you.
Yeah, we do proceed. This bylaw precedes Robert's rules.
My apologies. The other way, meaning, is Robert's rules acknowledged in here to default? Because if something's omitted from here, then the rules of Robert's rules would be in place. That's the concept that I'd like to.
It's section 15.1 has, or sorry, it's a little bit higher, but yeah, it is still in this one, just in a different place. Administration, did you want to speak to that at all?
No, that's correct. It is in the hierarchy of what sort of document sort of comes to the next one. So yes, if you were to remove that, it would revert to Robert's rules. So if that was not your intent, then you can look at perhaps rewording 16.2.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too am not comfortable with the way 16.2 is worded. I think you can take the presentation that we received tonight. If there wasn't an opportunity to ask clarifying questions until a motion was put forth, that would have been extremely difficult to be able to deal with. And I understand tonight is a standing committee, not a regular meeting of council. So, but still, if that had occurred, that presentation had come at regular, it would have been very difficult to put a motion forward without clarification. That said, though, I do very much support something along the lines of what Mayor Michaels was talking about, rather than completely removing 16.2. I would actually appreciate a little bit more clarity around what constitutes clarifying questions of the presenter to get additional information, and when that shifts to discussion and debate. I would like to have a delineation between those two. So until a motion's put forward, you can ask clarifying questions, you can get additional information, but there's no debate or discussion. That doesn't come until the motion's put forward. So some amended wording to modify 16.2, I would be comfortable with. Completely removing 16.2, though I'm not sure I would be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Magoon, do you have any feedback on that and maybe what the intent was?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, I think Councillor Ostashik and I were very much in alignment in terms of what our expectations are. We've talked about this. You know, this has been something that as a council we've endeavored to do. So certainly if somebody feels that they have a better way to approach that in terms of an amendment, I'd be happy to withdraw. And if the chair would grant them the sort of leniency to put those ideas forward, that would give me the latitude to withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Yeah, I you know, from hearing what council has to say, maybe just amending 6.2 to reflect that clarifying questions are permitted, and then allow administration to wordsmith it. Because I think if we try to figure out the exact wording on this in a motion, we'll probably not quite get it right. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, and I think that's getting close to where we want to be. So I'd ask permission from the floor to withdraw.
Yeah, any opposition to withdraw? Seeing none, yeah, that's withdrawn. I can't make a motion or direction. Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give it an attempt with what I've heard from many councillors. The committee direct administration to update section 16.2 to reflect the allowance of clarifying questions prior to a motion being on the floor, and to emphasize
Let me share.
pardon?
We'll just share and then you can see where we are in the
Oh,
capturing your motion. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mayor Michaels.
The allowance of questions prior to a motion being on the floor, and to strengthen the wording pertaining to debating and discussion. And if I may speak to it, it's not the most eloquent, but I really wanted to capture what Councillor Ostashik said, that this needs wording to say, we don't want to go in the realm of discussion and debate prior to it. And anything that administration could, draft up for us to support that while allowing clarifying questions, I think is what Councillor Stashik and some of us were saying. So I am open to and amenable to the change of that, but I really wanted to capture on the second part that it's quite clear to future councils that you cannot debate or discuss things. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think it's always going to be a challenge of the chair, especially as this gets updated to walk that fine line between clarifying questions and discussion. So I think no matter what, it's going to be a tricky one. Council, any questions or feedback on the direction that's on the floor? Seeing none, I will call the question that committee direct administration to update section 16.2 of Council Procedural Bylaw number 1153 to reflect the allowance of clarifying questions prior to a motion being on the floor and to strengthen the wording pertaining to debate and discussion. All those in, I'll wait for the screen to change. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Councillor Race, I have you in the main queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. An area that is of a concern to me is section 15, amendments to a motion. And my concern is something that I see happening, many times during a meeting where the mover of a motion will say, I do have an amendment to my motion, but because I moved it, I'm not allowed to make the first amendment. And I would like to change that. So my direction would be, when it's ready.
Councillor Race, is this a new point under section 15, or are you modifying an existing point under 15?
A new point.
Okay, thank you.
That committee direct administration to add the mover of the main motion can make the first amendment.
Did you wish to speak to that any more, Councillor Race?
I would, sir. I think all of us can sit back and think of times when the mover of a motion has said out loud, I wish I could amend this, but our bylaw is saying that we cannot be the first to amend a motion. In reading Morinville's council procedural bylaw, they have in their bylaw, which did receive review by a lawyer and did receive parliamentarian review, that amendments, First Amendment can come from the mover of the motion. So I think this would really be beneficial to our council and to council moving forward if the mover is allowed to make the First Amendment. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. And just, I have a clarifying question for administration. If this were to pass, but it was deemed to be not within the MGA or something, that would be something that would be caught prior to coming to October 5th, correct? Yes,
We will find that out, and if you see it on the 5th, it's because it's good to go, and if you don't, we'll speak to the fact that it was not in alignment with legislation.
Or yeah, for me, I support it in principle because I think could save us a lot of time sometimes with this weird kind of could somebody else do it for me thing, which if you're asking somebody else to do something that you want to do, it's maybe not that that great either. So in principle, I certainly support this. Councillor Race.
Yes, thank you. I think if we're seeing another municipality, saying that this procedural bylaw has received the review of a lawyer, and furthermore has also had a review of a parliamentarian looking at their entire bylaw, that this is certainly a valid something that we should add to our bylaw. And when we're done, can you put me back in queue, sir?
Sure can, thank you. For this, speaking to this one, or for the general queue?
It is also speaking to section 15.
But would it be a separate motion?
It's more of a question than a motion.
Okay, let's finish this one off and then we can address it. Council, any questions or feedback for the direction on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question that committee direct administration to add the mover of the main motion can make the first amendment to section 15. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. There's nobody else in the queue, Councillor Race, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This refers to section 15, amendments to a motion. I'm just having trouble not reading this, but it says, no amendment shall be made to a motion. And then I'm waiting for, when refer to a question, or should there be other wording, past a motion?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Race. I do think there's a grammar challenge there. Administration? While administration's having a peek, I'll go to Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just while we're at seeking clarity on 15.1, I just need a little bit of clarity too. I think I understand, but it's not saying that you can't make a motion to table a question or to postpone discussion on a matter to a stated time. It's simply that it can't be made as an amendment to the original motion, correct? You can still move to table the discussion or table a decision until later or postpone, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's all the clarification I needed. I just wanted to make sure I was reading it right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Administration, do you have feedback on the kind of the grammar to make sure it communicates that?
So Ms. Rendell, go ahead.
Maybe just add, no amendment shall be made to a motion, and then refer a question to table a question to postpone. Like just add to at the very end of that first sentence.
Just before the colon.
Yeah.
Add the
And
word to.
is that something you'd require an actual amendment on, or is it just
No, I can just correct that.
We'll make a note of that and clean that up. Thanks.
Councillor Race, is that something you're comfortable with?
Well, you know what's important to me is I don't want a new council coming in or even an old council coming in and looking at this document and saying, I haven't got a clue what this means. So this is our opportunity to clean this up. So when we're looking at it, we have a good understanding of how to use that section. So, if we can get there, I'll be happy. Because it's frustrating to read something and not know what it means. So, yeah, if that addition helps our council and next council coming in, I'm all for it.
Thanks, Councillor Race. I know we've had many conversations about the procedural bylaw and its interpretation. So, council, any other questions on the procedural bylaw? So seeing none, I would then look for that original direction that administration's seeking. Anybody up for making a direction to bring it to the October 5th meeting for all 3 readings? Councillor Hawes?
I'd like to move that committee direct administration to bring council procedure bylaw number 1153 as amended to the October 5th, 2021 regular council meeting for all 3 readings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, any discussion or debate? Clarifying questions? Seeing none, I will call to question that committee direct administration to bring the council procedure bylaw number 1153 as amended to the October 5th, 2021 regular meeting of council for all 3 readings. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Administration, anything else for this agenda item?
Thank you.
So that takes us to our council reporting. I will go to Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I have an RCMP committee meeting tomorrow.
Perfect. Councillor Hawes.
Only one quick to report, not a meeting, but with the new, with the exemption program, things like that, we received an email from the library looking at what we want to do. After looking at the document the government put out, libraries are actually out of scope of that program. So it appears that the library will be at 1/3 capacity with all the other restrictions as well, with masks and so forth. So that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing to report as far as committees or meetings, but one thing I do want to say is I just want to thank everybody outside of this council, everybody who has put their name forth to run for in our October 18th election. I'll tell you, it takes a lot to get out of your comfort zone and put your name forward. And I'm just so proud of everybody who did it. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things from Community Futures perspective. One is that they're looking for a new business analyst, and they can contact the general manager, Nancy Robbins, at the location. And also that the applications for the Smart Start program are now open, and that program will be starting in October. Thank you.
Perfect. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a Hinton Regional Economic Development Coalition meeting, first one in quite some time. It's been a while since that committee was able to meet. So we had a good discussion, roundtable update from the members and what's happening, what they're doing. Economic development made some updates on a grant application that was made and how that's progressing regarding some attainable housing development opportunities and some updates on our COVID business support program. The council made some changes to. The changes that council made is so far resulted in an additional applicant. So hopefully that gains some more traction moving forward. Chamber of Commerce announced that their Hinton Bucks program is out there and operating now. Hinton Bucks program is it's an interesting take on a shop local program where businesses can purchase Hinton Bucks that are redeemable at participating merchants in Hinton. If we want some more information on that, you can check out the Chamber of Commerce's website. Got info in there. They also updated, and I believe the official announcement went out for it today, that the municipal election forum will be on September 27th, with the councillors' debate from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. and the mayor's debate from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. So any candidates, be aware of that, and any interested citizens that would like to take a look at that should probably remember that too. That information is also available on the chamber website. And that's about it that I've got to report this time around. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. HREDC, I also attended with Councillor Stashik, nothing to add there. Evergreens meeting, we continued the discussion with the letters of support from our municipal partners, which is looking good. And the other thing we really discussed is we're going to do an internal CAO performance review before the end of this term in order to then have an external one for the new board that will take place next year. So monies will be spent more towards that, so they can get a more thorough understanding and of that process. And for us, we'll do a smaller, quicker internal one. And I just want to take a moment and thank MP Soroka and all those candidates who put their names forward in yesterday's election, and looking forward for the remaining time we have in next council to continue strengthening and working that relationship with our MP. So congrats, Mr. Soroka. And that's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I don't have much to report. I just want to offer condolences from last week's tragedy in our community, and offer some thanks to Hinton's RCMP major crimes unit that came out and supported an extremely professional investigation and arrest, and also a really special thanks to Victim Services. That's a largely volunteer organization that put in dozens and dozens of hours supporting the family and the friends that came out for support. So it's a horrible tragedy in our community, and looking forward to seeing steps that we take forward move forward with as a council and as a community to do whatever we can to ensure that doesn't happen anymore, but also recognize those that played a part in bringing it to a conclusion. So with that takes us to the council. Any urgent matters? Councillor Stashik.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if you could indulge me, it's not an urgent matter. It's something I neglected to mention during my report. No Thank you. My apologies. I neglected to mention that due to COVID restrictions and the expectation that they're going to be ongoing, the municipal election forum will not be an in-person forum as it generally is. It'll be a virtual forum hosted via Zoom. So anybody that wants some more information on how that's going to work, just head over to the Chamber of Commerce website, and all the information is provided there. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Chair. I really want to thank you for acknowledging the terrible tragedy that happened last week in our community. And as far as urgent matters, I think it's imperative that our council, our municipality sits down and has a talk about what we can do moving forward to bring change to the criminal code. I think it's vital that our council, our municipality has that talk. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Council, any other urgent matters? Right, that takes us to CAO reporting. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Howarth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to council. I have nothing to share with committee this evening regarding reporting or status reporting, but you do have in your package your action pending list on pages 78 to 97. Administration, and again, I apologize. I know you received 2 or 3 versions of this. Our system is kind of spitting out a few different versions of this report for some reason, dated back to August of 2017. But I believe the last update you have is printed today. It seems to have all of our updates in it that we've been working hard to get in front of committee, and it's been updated on the website as well for anybody that's wondering about what those changes were. So nothing in content, just again, the biggest piece that was missed was the revised date, which I think is the important piece, especially for the outgoing council to recognize when those items may come in front of the incoming council. And I guess if you have any specific questions about any of those items, I will try to answer them. I do have most of the team here tonight. We've even done some recent work this morning in terms of projecting out the next 4 months of the municipal world here, and trying to figure out what needs to get in place again for the incoming council. So if there's any questions specifically or concerns about what, we only have 1 more regular meeting, and not sure what's perhaps the committee will be doing with, or council will be doing with their October 12th meeting, but again, that will be a standing committee, so they'll, unless it gets changed to a regular, there will not be any decisions made on the 12th. So for sure, if there's anything you'd like to see between to come to your October 5th, we'll see if we can adjust some of these timelines. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Howarth. I'll turn it over to council with Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To CAO Howarth, I brought this up several times before, but MD 1686, the log benches. A couple years ago, a log bench was removed from the, the end of Mountain Street nearer to the Robb Road. And that person was assured that this bench that was being removed because it was just, was not in good condition, they would get a new bench back at some time. So where do I direct this person to go, to assure them that the bench is coming back? We just don't know when.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, thank you. Sorry, jumped in there too quickly. You can have them direct them to me, and I'll because it touches a couple of different departments in our organization, and so yeah, direct them to me, send that, and I will follow up and let council know as well. Thank you.
Yeah. May I continue, sir?
Is it on the same item or separate item?
Yeah, same item, and I'll be quick. You know what, a bench may seem like a small item to some people, but when you're an older person walking down the sidewalk going for a walk, I'll tell you, and I'm not talking about me, but it's nice to be able to stop and sit on that bench if you need a break. It really is. So thank you, CAO.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, it's on this item. It's actually been something that I brought up for actually since the beginning of the term, honestly. And, it's not the log benches personally that I'm concerned about, is replacing it with something better, something more longer lasting, something that doesn't going to fall apart or need that much construction. So I'm really hoping that revised date of December 31st or that's part of our budget conversation as to moving forward and have some sort of plan for those benches, because I think there's a lot of different, I know myself have sent things from AUMA of different products, different things, that might be a better fit for our community. I realized at the time the logs were, the decision, but I think we've proven that those logs need a lot of maintenance. and they deteriorate over time, and we need something longer lasting and more cost efficient. So I'm hoping that that's what's going to come forward from administration to council. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, anything else for action pending? Seeing nothing, that takes us to our legislative services update. Ms. Rendell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to mention that the official candidates list is on our website now. We have 10 candidates for councillor and 2 for mayor.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Rendell. Council, if nobody needs a break, maybe we'll go through a couple of these that would involve more members of administration, then take a break prior to the mutual performance discussion. Council, everybody good with that? So with that, I would accept a motion to go in camera. Councillor Haas.
I make the motion to go in closed session.
Council, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. We'll just give a second to
Just wait. Yeah, I gotta get. Well.
Live.
All right, Council, we are back to our meeting. We are in public session. Council, Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to seek consensus I'm not sure if Ms. Randall wanted to. Yeah. I'd like to seek consensus that committee direct Mayor Michaels to schedule a special meeting for the soonest feasible date. Regarding an extension to the consulting contract with Sage Analytics, Inc.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Did you want to speak to it at all?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council, any discussion? So I will be voting against this. I don't think it's the best idea to use more meeting fees and taxpayer dollars to delay a process that's very well underway. Thank you. Anybody else from council? Seeing none, I'll call to question that committee direct Mayor Michaels to schedule. Oh,
Sorry.
I'd like to call the question that committee direct Mayor Michaels to schedule a special meeting for the soonest feasible date regarding an extension to the consulting contract with Sage Analytics, Inc. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried 5-2 with Nelson and Waugh against. Council, anything else for tonight? If not, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. Move to adjourn.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.